and the time that the limit applies. Typically, we would see this between 15 minutes and 2 hours. It could depend on the needs of the adjacent properties or the needs of the area. And these signs, another thing to call out here is these signs would not be signed for a specific business. So metering. Another aspect of time limited parking is it could be metered or unmetered. If there was a metered option, it could start at $1 per hour in 15-minute increments. And that's a pretty conservative number, but it does tend to align with what we've seen in the surrounding area. This could be signed as a single meter per space or a single meter for each block. It also could be exclusively used as a phone application or a combination of both. And so moving on to enforcement. The police department cannot use chalk to mark tires, so we would need to manually track this time. Some other enforcement tracking equipment could potentially be utilized in the future for that. It is anticipated that one FTE could patrol 20 block faces, at least 2 patrols per day. So with the first implementation of 4 blocks, one FTE could definitely cover that, plus any expansion of the program in the future. And we have done a cost estimate for this. So this slide has a bunch of numbers on it. The key point is that the program is would be expected to result in a negative balance. It is expected that costs could range between $150K and $300K a year. If a meter was added, there could be revenues of $50K. This was done using assumptions around current parking utilization, turnover, and those costs included an FTE, a vehicle, meters, other indirect costs for staffing of tickets, things like that. And so to break even on this, if a meter was included, we would need to significantly raise the rate while maintaining the same utilization or expand the program into other areas. And so our final question for council is, does council direct staff to draft an ordinance for formal consideration regarding time limited on-street parking, or should such an ordinance be deferred until a future date when additional development has occurred that may benefit from such a program? And thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to council questions next. Who would like to start us off on this discussion? Councilmember Delgadillo, how fitting.
Yeah. Yes, it is fitting. Thank you, Mayor. I do have a few questions. So when I read the memo, it seems like there was a difference between the program activation and the writing of an ordinance. So you could create the structure for this kind of application without designating a specific area that way and thus incurring the costs. Is that a correct synthesis?
Yes, that is correct. We could, at this point, go ahead with an ordinance and then at some point in the future, evaluate getting funds for the program and implementing the program.
Okay. So we could separate the two. We could have the scaffolding for it, but not necessarily designate a place if it doesn't fiscally make a lot of sense. So I will say that is something that obviously it was my resident who was asking about this. I am kind of more amenable to that, but I'm sure we will hash this out from the dais here. The other thing I want to ask is that it seemed like from the memo, there was this 100% property owner threshold to agree to this. Did I read that correctly?
Yep.
Okay. I'm confused as to why the threshold is 100% when we have, for instance, a 2/3 threshold for traffic mitigation efforts. So 100% seems like a huge disparity between a number we've chosen for other traffic road related things?
Yep, that's a good question. And I think it's certainly open for consideration to use a lower number. The idea behind the 100% was, to ensure that those spots are currently meant for any resident to use, any business to use. So by signing them, we're essentially taking them away from those. We're taking away from public parking for those that do not necessarily need that. So that was the idea, and that would be by block. So, it like Arista Place, for example, like the other side of the street or the other, or a different block it could potentially be split on if there's time limited parking in one block versus another.
Okay, that is helpful because I think that should we decide to move forward with this, that is something that I would like to hash out more, either setting a lower threshold or being very clear. Like if it's these spots in front of these businesses, I could see that for a fairly small area needing to be 100%. But I think making it so that it's not overly onerous is something that I would find important. So those were my kind of questions here, is clarifying that. I mean, I will say that I would like to see an ordinance. I recognize that this is likely not the most urgent thing we have going on, but I think creating the framework for it could future-proof things, even if the numbers don't quite make sense for this. So those are my thoughts and those are my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hammerson, for this lovely presentation. I'm going to continue on the same path that Councilmember Delgadillo did with the reach out to businesses and residents, tenants versus owners of property. And in the memo, it says that while staff would undertake to get the opinions of tenants, it's more of a focus on what do the property owners want, which I'm a little not confused, but concerned about, because, a lot of businesses don't own the properties that they use for their businesses. They typically owned by someone else and they have a lease agreement through a commercial broker. And then same with, at least in Arista specifically, you have apartment complexes. So you have a management company that owns the property, but you have tenants that really are the ones that are impacted by this. Can you walk me through why the emphasis is put on the property owner when they may or may not really care?
Yep. So I think one point here too is that our intent is to not sign for a specific business. Similar to what I just was saying, how those spaces would be designated for everybody, anybody who wants to park there. So we don't want to sign those specifically for a business and take away parking that somebody else might want to use. So I think that's the one key point. And then two, if we sign for a business, and then that business leaves or changes hands, then there's communication on, okay, do we still have these signs, or do we still need these signs? Maybe not, then the signs remain there over time, and maybe they're not really needed at that point. That's happened with other signs that we use in traffic. So I think those are the two key points. Is one, we're looking to make these spaces available for everyone, not a specific business. And then two, if it changes hands, it creates a maintenance and communication concern.
Thank you. So I do completely agree that these spaces, they're on public right of way. They should be designated as public parking and not put for specific businesses. I agree with that. I guess my concern is, or I guess a counterpoint to that is, the signs go up. That area is, just as time goes on, is only going to continue to get busier. Um, and likely, when a tenant goes into lease, one of the spaces on the lower level, that is something that they're going to be aware of, either through the leasing information they receive from the broker or when they go and tour the property. That's something they'll see. And I don't necessarily see that being an issue with other communities that have implemented timed parking, paid parking, et cetera. I think with some of the other traffic signs, that would be true, but I'm not entirely sure that this will happen with this particular.
Okay.
I think my other question is, the memo specifies that we have a business in particular, and council has heard that business owner come and provide public comment about wanting to have at least signs that just limit parking. Do we have any other documented cases from business owners or even, I always want to call it Amley, but it's not Amley anymore, Arista Flats, the apartment complex on the other side, complaining about the lack of parking?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Um, so I would say based on that and some of the financial considerations that staff has outlined, I would be amenable to moving forward with setting up the framework for later down the road. But given that we only have one complaint out of, I don't even know how many businesses entirely stretch along that street in Arista, it's not necessarily worth the effort for the time being. Maybe when Baseline and Center Street and Town Square come to fruition, that is something we can revisit. So it is a better use of staff resources. Although I will say, I do have one further question. So for the parking structure that exists in Arista, there are, excluding the RTD section, there are timed limits for that parking. They have signs in there that say no more than 2 hours. Do we know how that is enforced, since there's a agreement between the city and county of Broomfield, RTD, and the master developer?
So those spaces are not enforced right now.
Okay.
We have kind of put off on making a decision on those until this discussion here. It's possible that they could be removed, or modified, or kept or modified, depending on how this discussion goes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I would just be amenable to what Councilmember Doug suggested, which is set up the framework for now, but delay implementation until such time as we have better use of that staff resource that we're dedicating to this. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we're going to go online to Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I am just wondering if there's a way to address this specific issue without without it being so expensive. And I'm wondering if it's possible to have signage to indicate that it is a 15-minute area for a couple parking spots, maybe call it a loading zone, and only have it complaint driven for enforcement. Is that a possibility? Because that would make it available to any of the businesses in the area that just need someone to park there for short-term use, including loading and unloading into the liquor store, even though they probably do that out back. And then if it's only complaint driven, then it doesn't require nearly as many resources.
Yeah, so a couple things there. One, I guess this ordinance would be establishing the legal framework to enforce time limited parking. Right now, the model traffic code is potentially, it's definitely unclear at best on what the enforcement of these signs would be. So part of our ordinance would be clearly stating that the time restrictions are enforceable and how they're enforceable and what the enforcement looks like. So that's number one. And then number two, kind of what I was just mentioning with Councilmember Ward and Councilmember Delgadillo, signing a couple spots creates that issue where if there's turnover in the business, then it's on Broomfield staff to either be removing those signs or we're relying on communication from the existing or new business owner to either remove those signs or keep them. So I think those are, a couple of the issues that come to mind with that particular proposal.
It still seems to me that it would work well in the short term, until we have something better documented. And if we have parking spaces in the parking structure that aren't enforced for their time limits, I don't see how this is significantly different. But I appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
All right.
Oh, I
thank
do
you.
have another question.
Of course.
Would it be possible to have a meter that allowed for the first 15 minutes to be free? Kind of like at the library in Boulder, where you have to indicate that you are parking there, but the first 90 minutes is free. That allows people to enjoy the library without camping out in a nice parking spot while they wander over to Pearl Street.
So we haven't gotten into the details of exactly how those meters work, but I'm confident that if it is desired, that's something that we could work out.
Okay. So we could technically put in metered spots that would still be free for the first 15 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow briefly up on what Councilmember Peterson, since my understanding is we only have one business has requested this. I think the only stretch of road in town that has this issue is in Arista. I can't think of any other area that has businesses on public streets to this nature. Is there any precedent for a business owner being able to reserve spots? They do that in their private parking lots all the time. Is there any mechanism, or has any city had any mechanism where a business owner can say, I'd like to have 2 spots out front reserved for me because of the parking pressure?
Yes, that's not something that we would do for our public parking spots.
For that stretch of Arista?
Yeah, correct. Yep.
So for the owner in this situation, his best action is to encourage people to park in the garage, I guess, which is not too terribly far. Correct?
Yeah, there are spots, all along Arista. If it was signed, or if we, did implement a program and it was determined that it should be 15-minute parking for that particular block, all the property owners agreed. We had enforcement lined up to take a look or to enforce that. That would be following the process through and I think would.
But potentially if the owners along that block, and I don't know if they all agree they have an issue, but if they all agreed, we'd like to have these to be 30-minute parking spots along this stretch, we could sign it that way with the understanding it's not going to be enforced. Just like the parking garage is not enforced. And just like there's a lot of socially enforced signage in parking lots around town where, reserved for the expectant mother, but no one checks that, and reserved for the retired military person or veteran, but it's just socially enforced. Is that something we could potentially do to address their concerns?
Yeah, so that would not be my recommendation. Just because the no parking signs or parking signs, they're regulatory signs, just like a stop sign. It wouldn't be my recommendation to install them if we have no intention of enforcing them. We wouldn't do that for a stop sign or speed limit sign or something like that. So my recommendation would be to follow that same standard and do that for no parking signs as well.
Sorry, do what?
And not put them up unless know we can enforce them, and we are intending to do so.
So you wouldn't put signage that says we encourage you to only park for a half hour, move along.
I think that's a different question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Member Anderson.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I did not realize how complicated metered parking was. I remember back when the Orchard Mall actually had the parking spots where you had to pay.
Yeah.
And they pulled them all out, and now it makes a whole lot more sense because they were probably losing money on that part. So if we do move forward with something, I highly suggest we just do the signs and not the actual physical meters, because there's so many places around Boulder and others, they just have the sign up, you scan the QR code, you just pay without the complexities of the meters. But I do not want to move forward right now, since we just have a couple spots and not even the 20 blocks for somebody to even for a full-time equivalent to even patrol. So is there any possibility that this could be such a small lift that someone on the existing staff could just go enforce those 2 spots? Because you wouldn't need to be going around 20 blocks, but is it specialized to the point where someone else just couldn't do that?
That would be I think maybe a PD question, if you're able to chime in on that.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Commander Witchlaws with Broomfield PD. So yes, if signs were put in, we could enforce that for that small area. It would be dependent on how the time limit. So every 15 minutes, like, we're not able to spend a 10-hour day or 8 to 5 there. So it would be intermittent. Because a lot of parking right now we do as complaint driven versus actually sitting and watching any violation.
Okay, so it could be something where just from time to time, somebody checks in and
to
partially
time.
complaint driven. Okay, that is helpful. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do have another question. So I guess I'm curious from staff's perspective, does it make sense, since all this work has already been done? Is it not that much more work just to put the ordinance in place now, or is that still a considerable amount of work? Like, if we just put the ordinance in place now and then waited to actually put any signs up? Or
Yeah, I mean, we've had a number of internal meetings already. Started taking some notes on like the framework of what that would entail. So I think it would make sense, or it wouldn't be that much additional effort to do so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is all my questions.
All right, next is Mayor Pro Tem Lim.
I just had one question that wasn't asked. So there's a note in the memo that refers to an eligibility trigger that would have a threshold for considering adding a new area if we were to go forward with implementing this ordinance. So so I guess how exactly would that trigger work? Right now, what kind of prompted this was one business asking the question. So are we going to monitor something in different areas of town? How is that going to work? Or are we going to wait for a business to request it in a different area of town?
I think it could be either. I think we have a good sense of kind of the denser areas where parking may be an issue. So I think it could be staff driven to investigate that. Or if there's a business that wants us to investigate it, we would definitely do so. And then, yeah, whatever those requirements are, parking utilization, whatever times of day it is, performing outreach and talking to the adjacent property owners, that would all occur at that point in time. Yeah, to determine if it should be expanded.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you. Any other first round questions from my colleagues? Before we move to round 2 requests? None? Do you? I just have a couple questions if you don't mind. So I've been involved in for 9 years, and this is the first time this has come up, and it has been from one business owner. It seems to me that Aristo was originally constructed and planned to be a walkable community, right? Like people are supposed to walk everywhere. So I think that's where I'm conflicted, is we're trying to put in these resources to manage parking in one area, but it's not that kind of area. I mean, it is just that. So maybe you have thoughts on that. I don't know. It seems like a big lift for this one location. Councilmember Ward. Prove me
Thank you,
wrong.
Mayor. Yes. I mean, I would say I agree. Arista was designed, envisioned to be a transit-oriented development where people rely more on public transit, walking, and biking. I think part of the complication, though, is we're still going to have, at least until we get better transit, more people who are coming in that don't live in Arista specifically. I don't think, and I would hope, that the people that live in Arista are not driving a block in their car to go, but
That would be me.
I know that happens. I am well aware that that happens.
Okay.
But I think you have other people that live in, Westminster or other parts of Broomfield or even Superior and Lafayette, et cetera, that are coming down, visiting, spending time there. And until we get better local and regional transit, I know they don't have kind of that as a viable option to pick from. And so I think it's trying to mitigate some of those external issues to Broomfield is part of this. But I also think this is a good framework setup for other parts of Broomfield, because we're only going to get busier. More people are still going to be moving into the metro area, and space is limited. So at some point we can't continue, and should not be continuing, to put more paved asphalt on our streets, or on our environment. And so setting up this framework is at least setting us up for the future, I would say. Did you have any other questions or?
No, I just
Okay.
looked up how many liquor stores were in the area to have people have choices, so they could go to one that has better parking. That's an issue.
There are certainly a couple that I know of in Broomfield, and they have the option to pick from what they would like, for whatever reason they want to go to one business or the other. The only other thing I wanted to add on, and this is something that came up from Mayor Pro Tem Lim, which was, how do we decide? We could just state that this is going to be policy for, certain areas that we've already designated as like parking reduction areas. And just make that contiguous with those spaces, because this only impacts on-street parking. It has no impact on off-street parking in terms of time requirements and whatnot. So that's just an option to something that Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Lim had brought up.
All right, well, thank you very much. We'll go to you again, Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, I just have one final question I'm kind of struggling with here, is that right now, you drive up, you park, you go in, and it's simple. If you have, if we put a time limited signs out there and they actually have to register, you either have to pay or do an app or something to go in, that is going to frustrate customers, I would think. I would think that the owner would want to have some kind of weighing on that, because that would not make your customers happy if they now have to register with an app. But if they don't register with an app, does that complicate the enforcement? Because now you don't know how long the car has been there. So is that kind of how it is? Like you have to register in order to really enforce it? Okay.
Yeah, so the signs could be, it could be like free parking, but time limited still, in which case there'd be no phone app or meter or anything like that. So that is a possibility. Just having it be free. So that way somebody doesn't have to register it. Then it's on, like Commander Witchwatch was saying, it's on the police department to be there for 15 minutes and watch that vehicle, or note that vehicle being there for that time. If there is a meter or a phone app or something and it is paid parking, from my research, that would make enforcement easier. Because even in a phone app, the system would send a notification for expired parking to whoever that enforcement officer is. So that would make it easier on enforcement, I believe, but not necessarily required. It could be free if we wanted it to be.
Okay, I appreciate that additional feedback. And I would, did anyone ask the owners if they thought that having if they're assuming it's free, or if they were thinking that the paid would be okay?
We have not had that discussion.
Because that would be interesting to find out. And then I do not want our police officers hanging around for 15 minutes to watch a car. Like that seems like not the best use of time. And I'll say I'm indifferent on whether or not we move forward right now with this code or in the future. It seems like we're a little premature, but if we're close, maybe it makes sense to put it in place for when the time comes. And thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henkel?
Thank you, Mayor. I keep trying to figure out how to put my words together on this one. Thanks for the presentation, and as much as we can, try to make businesses accessible in that area. I spent a lot of time in that area, and particularly not at the liquor store, but at Proto's across the street. They actually have one of those sandwich signs that's on the sidewalk, and it's always on the sidewalk for the business sharing their deals of the day, and it's actually pretty cool. Is there anything that would prevent a business owner from across the street using the same type of sandwich sign, except for requesting somebody to park there for only 15 minutes?
So yeah, I guess on our public right of way, the only Broomfield, it would either need to be a Broomfield contractor or Broomfield staff to do work and place signage, maintain signage on our public right of way.
I'm just curious, if the business could just say on a sign, thanks for coming here. We would just request politely, if you want to park more permanently, longer than 15 minutes, however they want to word it, they could have a sandwich sign like Protos does across the street and just use it for a different use. You guys would not confiscate their sandwich sign over that, I don't think. Correct?
Yeah, I guess I would say that we would.
Even if they're just saying, hey,
Yeah.
we use this for, we would politely ask for to use this business. I don't know how you'd word it anyway. Yeah. And I wonder too, if there's a business model where we could have one person take it out to them, or I don't know how that might work. I know accessibility can be an issue if you're taking more heavy items out, I guess. I guess I don't have too many questions. I will say though that Denver, I personally have been ticketed. I was parking in a place for 10 minutes delivering something inside of a building, and I come out and then a week later I got a ticket. They made $90 off of me. I was really bitter. I didn't see a sign that I had to pay for parking in that particular area. It was way high. I am 5'3", and I didn't see it. I actually went back to there. I was kind of bitter I had to pay $90. But there were cameras there that just picked up the fact that they stayed there too long. So if this becomes more of an issue within Broomfield, then we might have to, you know, deal with this in the future if we ever get our town square. For the time being, I'm not really seeing a huge trigger for this. I would encourage the business possibly to use a sandwich sign. Use it as an advertisement for your business and also maybe a personal ask for, you know, a parking or something. But I don't know if we really want a lot of police enforcing it. So I understand both sides, the business side of it and the police side of it. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or feedback from my colleagues? I did map it. It is a 3-minute walk to the event center parking lot, which we kept open to provide that extra easy access parking. Manager Hoffman,
Correct.
is there anything you wanted to add about the parking situation?
That's specific, one of the specific reasons that we left that parking open, that's right there by Hickory and Ash, was to accommodate
The parking.
this
conditions?
specific, again, we haven't
The
had
redesign.
anyone other than this business owner request or ask for a sign.
Yeah, I just want to caution my colleagues on creating policies for one-offs. You know, it's just not cost effective and it's not good governance, in my opinion. So what we need to do is give direction. Does council direct staff to draft an ordinance for formal consideration regarding time limited on-street parking? Or should such an ordinance be deferred until a future date when additional development has occurred that may benefit from such a program? So A is move forward, B is defer. Let's do that. I'll take a poll. Well, it's not a vote. It's a study session. So A is move forward, B is defer. Is that fair, Ms. Rogers? Make it easy? Okay, we'll start with Councilmember Peterson. I'll go in order. What say you?
B, defer.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to Councilmember Delgadillo.
A, create the framework.
Right, Councilmember Ward
I would say create the framework, but to defer enforcement.
and defer enforcement. That's kind of in the middle.
Well, that's what,
But I intended as well with A. It's literally no, like this,
no enforcement, just
create the
write
framework.
it, it's on the books for later use.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we're.
Is that possible? I mean, without
Yes.
utilizing resources?
Well, the resources will be to draft the ordinance, and then we'll bring it back for first and second reading. But we will not have an enforcement component in the ordinance.
Okay.
In that case,
So-
can I change my vote?
Sure, yeah, I wanted to make sure that was clear that, so you guys want the framework without,
Correct.
def-
We don't
and
have to
defer
designate
enforcement.
Arista right now. It just have it ready in case it becomes useful.
Okay.
Yes,
got it.
that's it.
And you agree with that, Councilmember Peterson?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lim. Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
I'm gonna go with defer.
Okay, B. And Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, I'm like somewhere in the middle, but I understand we don't need it now, so I would be, okay, just keep all this for later and defer.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you. Option C, Councilmember Cohen's social enforcement idea. If not available, then option A. Thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Hinkle.
This one's hard because I understand their plight. Let's do D.
Okay. Councilmember Cohen.
B, please.
All right, well, that will not move forward on a 5-4 poll. For now, we can always revisit if we get more than one request. Thank you so much, Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you,
For
everyone.
all you do. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item this evening is a discussion related to a potential code amendment to increase setbacks for gas stations proposed near sensitive uses such as residences, schools, daycares, and medical facilities. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. And joining us tonight is Mr. Harburg. He's our senior planner. He's going to walk us through this item. I know he's done a tremendous amount of research, and I want to thank the staff for fielding those questions. And those questions from council will be incorporated into the presentation, and we have the answers if we don't hit on everything during that presentation. Mr. Harburg is now a gas station resident expert per Miss Merwin in the back in the kitchen. Walk us through this item if you would, please.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Again, I'm Ted Harburg, Senior Planner. The topic of this presentation is a request for direction related to a potential code update regarding gas station setbacks. Next slide. Last May, City Council voted to request that staff bring forth a study session for consideration to increase setbacks for new gas stations that are proposed near sensitive land uses. The specific concern cited at that council meeting was the exposure to benzene and other environmental hazards. Next slide. So some of our current regulations, currently most zone districts that allow gas stations require either a use by special review and or a site plan that is first to be approved through a public hearing process. The code also requires that all new gas stations be separated by a minimum distance of 1,000 feet, with an exception that a maximum of 2 gas stations are permitted within 1,000 feet of each other at any single intersection of 2 roads, so long as the gas stations are not on the same side of the traveled street. Next slide. Staff's research has found examples of other jurisdictions that have restricted the construction of new gas stations within 300 to 500 feet of sensitive land uses. Denver recently approved a 300-foot separation between new gas stations and low-intensity residential, while other jurisdictions have established setbacks as large as 500 feet. Next slide. In preparation for this study session, Energy and Environment staff has prepared some additional research to assist in this discussion. And while this is not an exhaustive list, some of the notable results from these studies include a National Institute of Health study from 2023 showing that children living within 50 meters, that's 164 feet, of a gas station had about double the leukemia risk compared with those living over 1,000 meters away. 2 studies from Switzerland showed that children living within 50 to 100 meters of a gas station had higher odds of childhood cancers, including leukemia, compared with those over 500 meters away. And several studies have shown that gas stations are in fact a contributor to localized benzene emissions in urban areas. Next slide. So the California Air Resources Board is an agency, obviously from California, public agency that publishes guidance for land use agencies regarding how to evaluate the health risks from gas station emissions. And benzene is the pollutant that draws the most focus because it is strongly linked to cancer. This board recommends separating sensitive land uses such as residences, schools, daycare centers, playgrounds, or medical facilities at least 300 feet from large gas stations. Next slide. If council provides staff with direction to proceed, a proposed ordinance would first establish a list of these sensitive land uses. And the initial list includes the uses recommended by the California Air Resources Board. And I want to note that that list is different from the exact wording on the screen. California Air Resources Board recommends residences, public and private schools, daycare centers, playgrounds, and medical facilities. The ordinance would then restrict the establishment of new gas stations within a minimum distance of these uses, as measured from the closest property line of the subject gas station to the property line of the sensitive use. Depending on council's direction, these minimum distances are recommended to be between 300 and 500 feet. Next slide. Again, if directed to proceed with the proposed ordinance, planning will publish a Broomfield voice page dedicated to the proposed gas station setback code update to solicit public feedback. A notice of the code amendment will be placed in the community update, and the ordinance will be noticed in accordance with standard public notice requirements for ordinances in Broomfield. Staff will bring forth a draft ordinance tentatively scheduled for a first reading in September. Next slide. And I'm just going to leave these questions on the screen. I think first we'll want to have some time for discussion, and then these are the questions that we would like answered for further direction. Thank you.
Wow, the brevity tonight is just astoundingly appreciated. I didn't even, I had it up. Hold on. So, council. Let me enlarge this type. What we're doing here is seeking direction on what setback distance should apply and should reverse setbacks apply. You have it in your memo. Who wants to go first? Councilmember Cohen, you win.
I will go first.
Okay.
I don't think there's any disagreement that we shouldn't locate gas stations close to residential or places where children are going to spend an enormous amount of time. But I wanted to go back to the ordinance you just referenced that we passed. I'm not sure when that was, the 1,000-foot buffer.
Yes, I do not have the exact date of that.
Couple
ordinance in
years
front of
ago, I
me.
think it
Yeah,
was.
several years ago.
Can you repeat the stipulations just so we can?
Yes, let me find those again. So it requires that all new gas stations be separated by a minimum distance of 1,000 feet from other gas stations, except that a minimum of 2 gas stations are permitted within 1,000 feet of each other if they are at a single intersection of 2 roads and are on not on the same side of the traveled street, meaning if one's on the north side, the other's on the south side, so they would be capturing vehicles traveling in different directions.
My question is that we seem to have a lot, if we add on a layer of them, and you can't be near these 5 or 6 different uses, we're really limiting where a gas station can be sited in the community. And it's almost a de facto moratorium. I don't know where people, if they wanted to build a gas station. So I opposed that first ordinance because I thought it was anti-competitive. Didn't reflect the market, pretty much drives where gas stations are located, and gas stations need to be located in high traffic areas to survive. And also there's research to show you that if you locate gas stations close to each other, competition drives the price down. So when we separate gas stations, we ostensibly raise the price of gas a little bit because the competitive pressure to keep prices low goes away. But is there anything to my possibly crazy notion that it would make sense to go forward with environmentally sensitive buffers, but eliminate the rather arbitrary 1,000-foot, don't sit on the same side of the street, don't have too many within sight of each other, to avoid a de facto moratorium, encourage competition, and really focus on the health safety aspects of gas stations? I don't know if that's more of a rhetorical question, but can you address is there anywhere to site a gas station if we adopt all these things?
So a couple of points on that. We are planning to do a mapping exercise to show the impact of this. We would first need to define what that list of sensitive uses are, because we would then need to do the mapping exercise for each one of those sensitive uses, which will take some time. As of right now, I couldn't answer exactly which parcels in town this would or would not affect. We're taking a direction from council tonight, so if that's in addition to the questions that we are asking, we're open to any other feedback that you all have.
I would be interested in seeing the mapping. I think it'd be something to consider. I think if this goes forward, which I think it makes sense for sensitive land uses, I think 300 feet was what the research supported. All the uses cited make sense to be included. If it goes forward, I would probably bring a motion to reverse the other ordinance and get rid of it as a couple those two together. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next is Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions, but I appreciate all of the work that staff did in preparing for this, since I was the council member that had made the original Section 8 request. In terms of what staff is looking for answers to, I will say I am not in favor of revisiting the 1,000-foot buffer that currently exists in code. I think in terms of what the setback should be, I think it should be set at 500 feet. Better safe. And in terms of what is defined as a sensitive use place, I do think what was listed in CARB, California Air Resources Board, makes the most sense in terms of residential, all residential uses, public and private schools, settings, playgrounds, and medical facilities, as broadly as you want to define that. And then I do think reverse setbacks should also apply. I think it would be strange for us to say you can't build a gas station because of health concerns, but we'll let you build the housing or the park or the whatever in those same concerns for benzene exposure and other harmful chemicals. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question and then a lot of comments. So what happens to existing non-conforming gas stations under these new setback rules?
I think the current intention would not be to affect any existing uses, existing gas stations, conforming, non-conforming, anything that is already in business or already cited.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. That's, I wanted to just check up on that. And then the rest I have are basically just comments. One is that when I was looking at the nuance of what's a sensitive use, one of the nuances that I thought was important to call out is that in my opinion, I don't think that outpatient or generally non-overnight medical uses should be included as sensitive. I think we already have a dearth of, say, behavioral outpatient mental health providers, that sort of thing. I think people can make the decision on where to seek their care. And I don't think that restriction makes sense if you're only there for a limited time. I think it could be sensitive if you are an overnight patient, though. So that's one thing, because things like urgent care was also called out, and I'm thinking, no, I think it's okay, actually, if an urgent care is there, that makes sense. The other thing, a nuance in the memo, was regarding EV charging stations, how they're currently labeled as gas stations. I do think that before we move forward, we would want to tease those two out, because I don't think there are the same, there are certainly some, I'm sure some nuances with that, but I think there's not the same level of risk with an EV charging station, certainly not that benzene or anything like that. And so I don't think, maybe some setbacks should apply, but I don't think the same setback should apply. So yeah, teasing those out before we move forward with an ordinance makes a lot of sense. I'm actually not totally in favor of reversed setbacks, but I could see maybe if a tenant changes hands, right? So there was an existing childcare facility, that place left, went out of business, relocated, whatever it is. Probably for that new tenant, I could see that being a reasonable requirement. But I don't think, in the same way we don't want to impact existing gas stations, I think we shouldn't impact existing tenants either. And then we could apply, I'd be open to applying the reverse setback rules for new tenants, so to kind of keep things steady. And then in terms of distance, 300 or more, I am open to that. I think that sounds very reasonable. It seems like there is science to justify 300 or 500, so I'm open to those. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now go online to Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think most of the things that I was interested in have already been mentioned. I agree with Councilmember Delgadillo that healthcare facilities that are not overnight don't necessarily need to be applied as sensitive use. I agree that we are better safe than sorry, and going with 500 feet appeals to me more than 300 feet. I agree with Councilmember Cohen's comments about concerns about the mapping. And so I'm very interested in seeing what the mapping looks like. I saw the draft already. And I'm very interested to see, like, if we do go ahead with this, what is the actual impact on, like, can we put any more gas stations in Broomfield if we put these into effect? But until I know for sure, I am leaning toward the 500 feet and including reverse setbacks for new builds. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Cohen's remark about the distances between the gas stations, but I also want to note that the more stations that are clustered together, the greater the intensity. And then I think you get, this potentially even beyond the 500 feet. So I think we need to be careful with wanting to cluster gas stations for those living nearest to those locations. I definitely want to move forward. This has been brought up multiple times in the past as we looked at oil and gas operations and wondered just how bad the benzene was around gas stations. So I appreciate the research. And that 300 feet is the floor based on scientific studies. And I wonder if we get to the 500 feet and it's property to property, if there is, and this is probably something you're not ready to answer tonight, but if there's an option to the distance would be a minimum of 500 feet, but they could decrease to 300 feet if they met certain provisions. I don't even know what those are, but it depending upon what exactly is happening at that gas station, I think it's going to vary from one to the next. So maybe there's a set of standards that they meet that they could get down to that 300 feet. I briefly discussed thought about the monitoring that we do, but that's so sensitive that there's really no way you can't just pop in and monitor for a couple of days and go, yeah, all is well. So that'll be an interesting discussion to see where that lands. If there's anything that gas stations can do to very much reduce their benzene that is leaving their pads. And then on I like the CARB list of facilities, but I also want to make sure that playgrounds, it also includes ball fields, soccer, baseball, tennis, whatever, places where people are going to be very active outside, and assisted living. And then if we are serious about the very reason we're doing this is for the health, that doesn't go away when the reverse is true. So I definitely think we need to have reverse setbacks like we did for oil and gas, because that doesn't matter which one's there first, it's going to be the same impact. And that's everything. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Lim.
I have two questions. First, could you go back to the slide where it listed the sensitive uses and you said there was a correction that you had to make?
Yes. We go back to the slide. I believe, let me see here. That was slide 7. Yeah, so this presentation was published and I didn't realize that I had still had medical offices and parks. Those are not the correct terms. It should be, according to the California Air Resources Board, they recommend playgrounds and medical facilities. So that's the correction on that slide.
Okay. Okay. So I would, I appreciated, that was one thing I had in mind was besides child daycare facilities, any kind of overnight senior facilities. Councilmember Anderson mentioned that. I had that on my list. Yeah, outpatient medical offices that aren't overnight. I agree with some of the other council members about that. I don't think that needs to be on the list necessarily. So that's sensitive uses. My other question, could we please describe specifically where in the process a proposed land use matter would not be grandfathered in if we were to go ahead with reverse setbacks? So concept review, it's not grandfathered, is that correct? From
Correct.
there.
Thank you for that question, Mayor Pro Tem Lim. And Ted and I are both nodding. Yeah, until an application is submitted, I don't think anybody has a right to that land use. Once an application is submitted, then we do have some challenges.
Okay, So it doesn't have to be approved, correct? It just has to be submitted to be grandfathered.
What I will say in a public meeting is there's some legal reasons that I would probably advise that if an application has been submitted, that council recognize that application and it included in a grandfathered group.
Okay. Yes to the reverse setbacks. And what else did I need? 500, yeah, 500 feet. Lost now we're not on the right slide to see.
Can we go back to the
but I
question
think
slide?
that's it. I think that's it.
No, actually, it's a little bit further. There we are. That's the slide.
Thank you. Yes, I think I answered them all. So that's it.
Reverse setbacks?
Yes,
Okay.
reverse
Great,
setbacks.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one sort of question about possibly either reverse setbacks or the setbacks themselves. As Ward 5 is probably the highest growing ward here, and we're gonna have to interface with Weld County to our north, Adams County to our east. How would this interface with other gas stations in other jurisdictions or housing?
Good question. I think depends on how the ordinance is drafted. I think with the 1,000-foot regulation, the way that's drafted, I would read that as also applying to gas stations in other jurisdictions, but we could qualify the language. So it could really work either way.
So Nancy, do you think that we could, Ms. Rogers, sorry, do you think we could, is there jurisdiction though in other areas that we could say, hey, you can't build that, or no?
Not in, we have jurisdiction, thank you, Councilmember Hinkle. We have jurisdiction over land within Broomfield.
Yeah.
So we can say that in Broomfield, you cannot build.
Yeah.
And even though the use that triggers that setback is outside of Broomfield, that's possible because again, we're talking about the building within Broomfield. But we have no control over any land outside our jurisdictional boundaries.
Okay, so there could be a gas station across Weld County, which wouldn't surprise me, that would go in across from housing or whatnot. Okay.
Mhm.
I am okay with the minimum 300 feet. And then if we have, I also agree that the outpatient doesn't need to be on that list. And then the reverse setbacks, I would like to use informed consent on that rather than reverse setbacks. I've gone to bat at the COGCC when it was called that at the time. It's now ECMC, and really wanted to have informed consent with oil and gas extraction. And I feel like informed consent also is very important when we talk about gas stations. California, for instance, has basically informed consent printed on all of their cars, talking about benzene. They literally print it on the windows of the cars that use gasoline. So I'd be curious to see if we could use informed consent rather than like a reverse setback. We could say, hey, you are within this amount, this area of a gas station, and here's, some issues. Now I know the real estate agents would probably be mad at me for this. And I don't know the enforceability of it, but I think informed consent would be important in that instance. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other council member feedback? Councilmember McKenzie.
Point of clarification. In these sessions, are we all supposed to raise our hand and ask questions and then say our opinion?
Yeah, you can do both in a study session,
Ah.
so it's not as formal.
Okay.
We're not really voting, so it's to give feedback, mainly to give direction and ask questions.
One, yes. One, second question, B, two, yes. Dr. Robert Bullard has interesting work on this area of interest. Thanks.
All right. And we still need to hear from Councilmember Brown. Oh, please, go ahead, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the presentation, the memo was greatly informative in this matter. I am in favor of moving forward with it. I support the 500-foot setbacks and the reverse setbacks. So thanks.
All right, thank you. Did everybody have a chance to weigh in? Did you get a good amount of feedback? Where did you land?
I
Where
believe we got good
land?
feedback. I don't know if we got your responses. Mayor.
Well, I am only relevant if there's a tie.
Okay.
Are you split?
No, we are not split.
What was the consensus?
I believe there is direction to move forward. The majority of responses are to move forward with the 500 feet. Yes on reverse setbacks. Those were the questions that we heard. One, I guess not a vote, but opinion to repeal the 1,000-foot setback, but I did not hear wide support for that.
Okay. There's reasons. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Our next item this evening provides an update in regard to greenhouse gas emissions. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Health and safety is the
Sustainability
topic
night.
for the evening. As our folks make their way down, Alex Moore Van Dyke is our sustainability policy analyst. Ms. Moore Van Dyke, it's always good to see you. Looking forward to learning more about greenhouse gas inventory.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. My name is Alex Moore Van Dyke, and I am the Sustainability Policy Analyst on our sustainability team, which is located in our Public Works Department. Tonight, I am here to give you all an update on where Broomfield stands regarding our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, providing an update on our greenhouse gas emissions inventory efforts, and introducing a tool that's going to play a central role in how we conduct climate action planning going forward. There are two threads to tonight's presentation. The first is the inventory update, what our emissions data shows from 2017 through 2024, both community-wide and for our own municipal operations, which will show us the progress towards meeting those targets. The second is an overview of ClearPath 2.0, an upgraded planning and forecasting tool available to us through ICLEI. This ClearPath 2.0 tool is how we'll be tracking progress for our sustainability actions, modeling future scenarios, and making the case for where to invest our limited resources. This builds on a 3-part GHG inventory and action planning series we ran with our Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, or ACES, in March, April, and May. So our quick agenda, we'll start with some background on how we measure emissions, use ClearPath 2.0 for our inventory, and what targets we're working towards. Then we'll get into the actual data, both community-wide and municipal operations. After that, I'll introduce the planning and forecasting side of ClearPath 2.0. I'll walk you through the ACES activity that occurred at our April meeting, which is a hands-on prioritization of climate interventions or actions, and then close with what the ClearPath 2.0 dashboard can do for our long-term trajectory of emissions. Next slide, please. So before we get into the inventory results, it helps to remember what we're measuring against. In 2020, Council adopted greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, and our GHG emission reduction plan was formally adopted in April 2022. On the community-wide side, the targets are 26% emission reduction by 2025, 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050. For our own municipal operations, the buildings, fleet, and infrastructure we directly control, the targets are more aggressive. 30% emission reduction by 2025, 60% by 2030, and we're aiming for 100% by 2050. So when I share the inventory data in a moment, keep those benchmarks in mind. They're ambitious, but they give us clear direction. Next slide, please. So ICLEI is a global network of local governments committed to sustainable urban development, and their US arm is ICLEI USA. They're the organization that developed the tool ClearPath that we use for our GHG inventory and climate planning. It's the standard platform that hundreds of cities and counties across the country use for this work, which is important because it means our data is calculated using the same IPCC-aligned methodology as our peers. IPCC meaning Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In 2025, ICLEI rolled out a major upgrade, ClearPath 2.0, and Broomfield was an early adopter. That's relevant because the new version, when compared to the old one, has significantly more planning capability, which I'll walk through later. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the community-wide picture. Our baseline year is 2017, when total emissions were about 850,500 metric tons of CO2e. As of 2024, our most recent inventory, we're at roughly 726 metric tons, a 15% total reduction. Now, I want to be upfront. Our 2025 target is an emissions reduction of 26%. So we're not there yet, but here's important context. Broomfield's population has grown by 20% since 2017. We have more people, more homes, more businesses, and yet our emissions are down 15%. When you look at it on a per capita basis, the story is even stronger. We've gone from 12.5 metric tons per person down to 8.8. That is a 29% per capita reduction. That shows progress is being made, even as our community grows. Next slide, please. So this slide breaks down where our 2024 community emissions are coming from. Commercial and industrial energy is our largest sector at 33%. Transportation is a very close second at 32.6%. Residential energy accounts for 25.7%. And then process and fugitive emissions, which includes emissions from our oil and gas operations and the distribution of natural gas from our utilities, make up 6.5%. Waste is a small slice at 2.2%. The big takeaway here is that energy use, including commercial and residential, and transportation together make up 90% of our total emissions. If we want to move the needle significantly, these are the areas that matter most. Next slide, please. Shifting to what we directly control, our municipal operations. The baseline here is 2019, when we emitted just over 18,700 metric tons of CO2e. By 2024, that's come down to about 17,700 metric tons, a 6% reduction. Our target here is 30%. So this is the area we have the most ground to make up. Here's some important context. Since 2019, the city has added 25% more square footage in our facilities, and we're treating 16% more water. We're doing significantly more with less energy per unit. Again, that's real progress, even if the aggregate number hasn't moved as dramatically as we'd like. Municipal operations represent 2.5% of Broomfield's total overall emissions. So while it is a smaller slice of the pie, it's the area we have the most direct control over, and it matters for leading by example. Next slide, please. Within our operations, buildings and facilities are the dominant source of emissions at 52%. Water and wastewater treatment is the second at 35.2%. Vehicle and transit fleet at 10.4%. Waste is 1.8%, and fugitive emissions at 0.6%. This tells us pretty clearly where to focus. If we want to drive down our operational emissions, our buildings are the best place to start. Water and wastewater at 35% is also notable, and it's worth understanding that most of these emissions come from the energy required to treat and pump water. So improving energy efficiency in our water systems is a major opportunity and is currently underway with the wastewater treatment upgrade and expansion efforts. Next slide, please. So now that we've gone through the results of the community-wide and municipal inventories, and we understand where we're at, it's time to move further into action. As mentioned briefly at the beginning of the presentation, ClearPath 2.0 isn't just an inventory tool, it's a full climate planning platform. Briefly, I want to highlight what's new and why it matters for us. First, it allows progress tracking year over year for the actions being taken. Second, it has scenario modeling, so we can test the impact of specific actions before committing to them. Want to know how to test our emissions if we expand EV charging? We can model that. Building retrofits, we can model that too. It also has a public dashboard capability with a customizable page, unique URL that we plan to launch later this year for community transparency. And it introduces terms like transition elements and interventions, which I will explain in a moment. There are also optional add-on packages for ClearPath 2.0 for economics and energy analysis that are each an additional annual cost. These add-ons aren't something we're bringing to council for a decision tonight, but they're available if we want to dive deeper into these analyses in the future. Next slide, please. So this slide introduces the transition elements framework, which is a backbone of how ClearPath 2.0 connects our day-to-day emissions to our long-term emissions outcomes using concept of transition elements. So think of transition elements as standardized building blocks of climate action. At the core of each of these elements is an activity shift from a high carbon activity to a low carbon alternative. For example, shifting from fossil fuel cars to EVs, or switching from gas heating to heat pumps. These are all levers we can actually pull within the tool. The idea is to trace a clear line from the interventions we adopt to the policies all the way through to actual emission reduction outcomes, left to right. The framework does this through 5 layers. Interventions affect our attributes, which shape our behavior, leading to activity shifts, which produce quantifiable outcomes. We already have guidance from our GHG emission reduction plan on what activity shifts to focus on, our proposed energy and transportation actions. But ClearPath 2.0 asks, can we get more granular, more quantifiable? And that is exactly where the interventions come in. We can model not just the direction, but how far each specific action moves the needle. Next slide, please. During our April ACES meeting, we ran a hands-on prioritization activity for the interventions. Attendees had 59 interventions in total to consider, 29 in transportation and 30 in building energy, all labeled as either underway, planned, or under consideration. After reviewing all 59 interventions using sticky dots, attendees could only each select 12 to prioritize, 6 in energy and 6 in transportation. We asked attendees to weigh 4 things: what activity shift could be linked to the intervention, the impact, so how meaningful is emission reduction potential, feasibility, given funding and staff capacity, and trackability, our ability to measure progress over time. It was a great exercise for surfacing where the group sees the most promising opportunities. Staff is currently working on reviewing the high priority interventions, so next step include modeling them in ClearPath 2.0 and bringing the results back to ACES. Funding, staff capacity, and time will all factor into this starting list. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides are a demonstration of ClearPath 2.0's scenario modeling capability, not a final analysis, but rather a preview of the kind of modeling we'll be doing as we refine our climate action planning strategies. I've added the transition elements, those building block activity shifts that we have meaningful control over, into the tool. The chart on the left shows the potential emissions reduction available for each one of these activity shifts. That's the light green bars. The chart on the right shows the projected emissions trajectory. The key thing to notice, even with all that potential on the left, the trajectory on the right is still trending upward. Why? That's because no emission reduction targets have been set yet. We've identified the levers, but haven't yet said how hard to pull each one. You can also see that some levers are much more powerful than others, like walking and cycling and shifting to electric cars. Next slide, please. Now, this is still a demo, but it shows what happens when you start assigning actual emission reduction targets to each activity shift. In this example, we've set the EV target to about 40%, meaning 40% of fossil fuel cars are replaced by EVs. When you increase that shift, the bar for that activity goes from light green, potential emissions, to dark green, saved emissions. And the dark gray bar on both charts, which represents our remaining emissions, shrinks. That shrinking gray bar is exactly what we want to work toward. The point here is to show that a holistic analysis is capable with this tool, with everything moving dynamically together, and that staff will be working internally and with ACES to model a scenario or scenarios that bring us to our 2050 target. Next slide, please. This dashboard view brings everything together, starting from our 850,500 metric tons of CO2e baseline in 2017. If we do nothing, emissions are projected to grow by 9% by 2050, that red dashed line going up. Our goal is to reduce by 90% from the baseline, the green dotted line going down. The white line is where we actually are, our reported inventory tracking downward from 2017 through 2024. The color stacked area is projected gross emissions over time, linking to those transition element targets from the last two slides. Gold is energy, green transportation, and there's a tiny blue line at the bottom, and that's waste. For tonight, to be able to show what this dashboard is capable of, I modeled all relevant transition elements to show what shifting those activities looks like over time. Just to note, if I had not done that, the gross emissions would follow the red dotted line going up. But the key here is that you want those gross emissions to align with where that green dotted line ends at 2050. So how things are currently modeled, this tells us that there is a gap and we'll likely need to add more transition elements, set higher targets, or both. But it also shows real progress. And importantly, this view doesn't yet include our utilities carbon reduction goals, which matters a lot. Next slide, please. Ooh. But here's where things get more exciting. When you do factor in Xcel Energy's commitment to 100% carbon-free electricity by 2050, that gap shrinks dramatically. A huge portion of our emissions come from the grid. So as the grid gets greener, our emissions decrease in conjunction with local action. It doesn't mean we can sit back, but it does mean we're not going at this alone. The modeling of those relevant transition element targets, while just a demonstration for tonight, are also very reasonable, especially when partnered with our utilities goals. However, it also shows us that we have a little bit more ways to go with those targets. The white line, or our inventory and actual reported progress, is already not far from that green dotted line. And that's exciting because it shows that progress is being made. What we'll be doing with ACES and staff over the coming months is refining these targets so the gross emissions curve follows that green line as closely as possible by 2050. And that's exactly what ClearPath 2.0 is built for. Next slide, please. The work ahead is about using this tool to make smarter, more strategic decisions. We want to ensure that our limited resources are put towards the initiatives that will be most effective. ICLEI will soon be rolling out the government operations side of ClearPath 2.0, and the hope is that we'll be able to get more granular with our emission reduction planning on a municipal level. Next steps summarized, staff will take high priority interventions from the ACES activity, looking at funding, capacity, and timing, model them in the tool, working to set activity shift targets that model gross emissions to align with our 2050 target, and we'll bring those back to the committee for further discussion and refinement. The goal is to focus our efforts moving forward on the most effective actions. Next slide, please. I just want to thank all the ACES members for their engagement with this effort over the past 3 months. It was a lot to learn. And thank you all to staff who gathered source data and provided clarification as I worked to prepare our 2024 inventory and reviewed findings over this past year. I'm now happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moore Van Dyke. That was such an enlightening and fun to listen to presentation. I really like your style. And thank you, Mr. Gordon. Very informative. We've been waiting to find out how we were doing. So let's get to council questions, starting with Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. Thank everyone for their work. If you can hear me online, sometimes people hear us online. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of data crunching, everything. I have two main questions right now, and then I'd love to hear other council members kind of chime in. I'm curious about the 2.0 program and how we might be tracking our own GHG emissions if it's using a cloud-based service. We know that if we have our computers here and our phones, we all use data centers. And so I'm just curious about if we know the 2.0 system would use more data and use more cloud storage, and then are we accounting for that GHG emission, or do we know?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's all built into this platform. So it's not necessarily like an actively learning platform that I would say AI is kind of built off of. I'm sure there is AI being used as part of this, but I'm, and it can also be modeled into the tool as well. Increased emissions from data centers, I'm sure. So
Mhm.
it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, just any cloud storage. If anyone has cloud storage, they use data centers. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
My second question is I noticed that the waste on the bottom was the blue line. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you mind going back to that slide? There's a couple slides with it as as like very bottom. Now with us moving towards having our own city and county trash service, right? Which really is a certain percentage out of the city and county of Broomfield. We do have trash and recycling. Part of my trash now, because the composting service that I paid for went out of business, I can no longer compost right now. I mean, I could, it wouldn't look very pretty, but they just provided a really good service. So I'm just curious as to if we are counting our trash now as city and county owned, and if we are counting, I feel like composting is one of those things that Seattle, they just mandatorily, it's like illegal if you don't compost. I think at certain point, we need to get to that point. Are we accounting for composting as part of our GHG emissions, now that we own that program?
Yeah, so the data, so unfortunately in the data presented tonight, it's 2024.
Yeah.
So it's going to be prior to when our residential waste services program was enacted. I will say though, the data that we get for our community-wide waste data is through a system called Retrack, which Boulder owns and Boulder County owns and manages, and they still let us use it since we are historically Boulder County. And so it's a great way to receive the data. And through that, we actually, what companies do report their data to, they can break it out with municipal, or sorry, like just trash, recycling, as well as like organics and e-waste. So we do have the breakdown of all of that data, and that is included in the inventory data.
It is. So it's still going down,
Mhm.
even though we're kind of taking this on as a city and county. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And I'll just also add that the source data itself, the overall amount of tonnage from our just overall community-wide waste has also continued to go down over time, which is great.
Yeah.
So
no,
just
that's
less people
great.
generating waste.
Yeah, yeah, organic matter too. I feel like, banning the plastic bags was a big win for Colorado, for sure. Okay, I can't wait to hear what other council members have to say. Those are my two sort of overarching 30,000-foot level questions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions as well. How much of the reduction to date of our reflection of Broomfield zone activities versus that grid decarbonization? I was trying to tease that out.
Do you mind repeating the question? Sorry.
Sure. So it seems like, and this is going to be kind of a theme of my comment, which I'll get to. It seems like there are a lot of factors that are in our control.
Yeah.
And many others that are not within our control.
Yes.
And it sounds like the grid decarbonization efforts are a huge factor
Yeah.
in kind of hitting the goals that we have. So how much of our progress, how much of our future progress is dependent on that versus our current efforts?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the greening of the grid. In our greenhouse gas emission reduction plan, which came out in 2022, it was, I think they estimated like 60%, at least 60% of meeting our goals, our in target was going to be based on just the greening of the grid. But I will say, like, the difference between this slide and the next one still shows that we are still making progress with the current actions that we're taking, but definitely the greening of the grid will significantly help that. And that's also just, we kind of have to take their word for it, right? And hope that our utilities will commit to the goals that they've set themselves. But there's still a lot of action and work being done in terms of just like electrification and decarbonization on our buildings. That's being done at a like massive Front Range scale, which will certainly help to impact local efforts as well.
Okay, that's really helpful. That helps conceptualize that. And yeah, this is like what is it? It's like a door with 15 deadbolts on it, and you can loosen up a couple, but there's still more before the solution comes to fruition. And then the other question is, so the constraint for acceleration, for improving our efforts, is that budget, headcount, probably a lot of things outside our control. What would you say the constraint is at this point?
Ooh, what's not?
It's not, okay.
No, I mean, it definitely like we're running on like a 2-3 person team. So there's also just only so much we can do internally with policies as well as programs and implementing that as well. But it does take partnerships. That's a huge piece of sustainability, is just working across every like line, which is what we are working on building internally. So even though we are housed within Public Works and we work very closely with our Public Works team, we also have a lot of connections with other departments, of course, because we can't do it alone. And then our external organizations, partnerships with DRCOG, Commuting Solutions, all of those will just help strengthen our relationships moving forward and the work that we're doing together.
Great, thank you. And then I know there was not really a request for feedback, but I'll do it
accept it.
anyway. Okay, thank you.
Well,
so-
there kind of is, because there's revise the targets.
Right, yep.
Move the needle, no action, or accelerate the timeline. So there's like
Right.
3 options.
Oh, never mind then.
Direct away.
Perfect, great.
Okay.
I do think that I want to say that these are incredible efforts by the team, and I certainly, especially to my senior colleagues here, I really respect and celebrate the fact that we passed these really ambitious goals, and I think that was undeniably the correct decision. My direction is, I guess, a little different from acceleration, stay on track. I wonder if we can amend these goals to be a little bit more specific. So one thing that I was very struck by is that only 50 of the 214 transition elements are actually in our control. So I wonder if it would be wise for us to focus on having goals that speak to the things within our control and measure those, and then also make our goals more on a per capita basis, because I think it's clear that as we continue to welcome more people, but the people here on account of our policy are generating fewer CO2 emissions. I think that's a win, even if the overall decrease has not been as dramatic as we would have liked. So I would say, I guess this is not, I mean, acceleration would be great, right? But I would say the main thing for me is if we can get more specific goals that speak to the things we have control over, and then make these perhaps more per capita specific. I do think that that could be great. That could really honor and celebrate the progress that we've made, and also make them so that I think having more specific and clear targets within our control will actually help us even more with accountability, as opposed to having these big lofty goals that we don't necessarily fully have control over. So that's my direction.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
I like that approach. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation. Fascinating to see kind of all the data you've collected and this new model that we can use going forward and how that will impact our, or hopefully influence our decisions. I have one quick question when it comes to emissions from that we have direct control over, the waste treatment facility. How much of those, I know you said a lot of the emissions come from actually just treating our water, wastewater, et cetera. Do we have a breakdown of how much of that is just treating it versus how much are maybe like fugitive emissions from methane, for example, coming from the wastewater?
Yeah, well, this is something I've been trying to get more granular with because the data that comes from Excel and United, that is representative. It doesn't break down our like each specific building within the water and wastewater treatment plant, right? It kind of coalesces it all into one. But in talking, I've had more recent conversations with the engineering firm who's helping with the water treatment project, Carollo, as well as with our public works, water utilities director, Ken Rutt, and just understanding more on like a CIP level of the breakdown of the emissions from the buildings versus actual understanding of energy use to treat the water. And it's a lot. It's kind of convoluted, honestly. But that is something I am working towards to kind of understand a bit better. I don't really have a good number for you tonight, but I can certainly come back with that later.
Okay, great. I will, the next time we have an update from water utilities, I'm gonna
Hold
try
it
and
to it.
remember to ask that question.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things that was mentioned, transportation is a huge emission of ours. And I was curious, at least for our employees, do we have like a transportation demand management plan put in place, or trying to figure out ways to incentivize alternative transportation methods to for employees that are coming to work, et cetera?
Quick clarification.
Yeah.
Are you talking about city and county facilities or employees, or just like employees within?
City and county employees. I know we don't have one for just everyone, which is something we should look at.
That is one of the interventions actually that was proposed. But no, currently right now there is no, and I'm speaking on behalf of our transportation team, so hopefully I'm getting it mostly right. There are efforts ongoing to try to help with incentivizing taking public transportation to work. But as of right now, there is no like EcoPass incentivized incentive. That's not going to be the right word.
Incentive program.
Yep, that's it. Incentive program on the books right now.
No worries. And that could include walking or biking for those that do live in the city and county of Broomfield. I have a quick question just on making sure I'm understanding some of the graphs. So on it's slide 13, if we could go to that one, please. I just want to make sure I'm understanding some of the
Yeah,
the colors.
there's a lot going on here.
So the dot, which I thought was red, but Councilmember Delgadillo corrected me and said it's green. I am colorblind.
It can be
so-
red though. Light red, dark red.
What exactly is that dot supposed to represent?
Yeah, so that dot is basically your target setting. So that dot for electric cars, for instance, right now is set at like a 40% target of emission reduction. Versus like journey sharing is set at like maybe like 10% emission reduction target. But basically the shift from that is your shift of I want to shift 40% of our fossil fuel cars to EVs.
Okay.
like the example.
And so like using the example you had, the shared journey travel, we want to shift 10% of our mode share to that, is how I should understand that, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. How did staff come to those specific numbers for those very specific types of transportation alternatives?
Yeah, so this was me just kind of demoing the tool.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing set right now, but I will say like where these are casually set does bring us to those like lower gross emissions, but we are going to work with ACES to refine those targets.
Great.
Okay.
Just wanted to make sure on that.
Yeah.
And then on the previous slide to that one, That light green bar, if I'm correct, the light green
Yeah,
bar.
yes, it's light
yes.
green.
Right?
Yes.
It's like it's light green or yellow.
Yeah.
That is the just how much, let's just say, if you got everyone to do remote working,
Yeah.
you could save up to roughly 200 TMT. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Okay, just want to make sure. Those are all my questions, so thank you very much. But in terms of feedback, again, I do want to, as Councilmember Delgadillo had mentioned, I do want to applaud us and previous councils for taking action to set targets, and the work that staff has been doing to try and get us to meet those targets through our residential trash hauler program and changes that we've been making internally, and just partnering with, Dr. Cog and whatnot. And I assume slightly harassing probably Xcel Energy and United Power to make some changes. So I do want to applaud all of that. I'm going to take somewhat of a hybrid approach to what Councilmember Delgadillo had mentioned, which is I do think we should probably focus more on the areas in which we have kind of direct influence. But I also want to recognize that many of those areas that we have direct influence also are in some ways somewhat more minor pathways to reducing emissions. Like, we don't really have control over commercial industrial energy. That is entirely Xcel. Now, we certainly can set policy that incentivizes new construction of buildings to be more environmentally sustainable, and we have done that. And residential is in the same boat. Transportation is a shared type of thing. So I think focusing more on that, but really focusing on some of these, like, transportation is a big one, ensuring that we're really furthering our emission reduction targets for new constructions in residential and commercial spaces. But I also want us to take the third alternative where we are more aggressive. I mean, this is one of the things that does concern me as the youngest member of this council, that I do get concerned that there are years in the future where I may not be able to do certain things, like go skiing, for example, because of the inaction that we as a global society really are not taking on this matter. And I can't control what they do, but I can control what we do. So I would like us to take more of a faster approach to try and reduce those greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as we possibly can, and focus on areas where we either have direct control or even somewhat of a shared control, like transportation, for example. I know, one of the things on slide 11 was, one of the biggest impacts you can have is walking, biking, taking public transit. Those are not the end all be all. I know there is still going to be the use of the car in certain situations, and we should electrify those as much as possible. But we also do have some control over whether we get increased public transportation. We don't have to necessarily entirely rely on RTD, knowing they have not been a reliable partner to this date. That could potentially change, but we should take more of a hands-on approach to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to go online to Councilmember Brown.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Moore Van Dyke, for the presentation tonight. I am fully aware that this is a long time coming with the ACES group. And so just really excited that you have brought it forward in such a great way tonight. So I am excited about the dashboard that's going to be forthcoming here in 2026, and really those analytic insights that we're going to have access to through ClearPath 2.0 MOO. And just not to mention the opportunity tonight to talk about how we're going to set Broomfield up for success here. So one observation I wanted to make really quickly, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but for my fellow council members, something that we discussed in ACES is that unfortunately, we don't have the ability to include the RMMA or rail travel information in Broomfield. And so that was kind of inconspicuously absent. And I know I mentioned this because several of you have interests in those areas and working with the airport. So I don't know if you want to speak to that briefly and maybe our ability to estimate with that emissions data in the future.
Yeah, I can speak to that real quick. Thanks. Yeah, so the RMA airport was not included in our emissions, mostly because it is owned and operated by Jefferson County, and it is also, to my understanding, looking at our parcel map, with outside of our county boundary lines. So that was why it was not initially included. However, other cities like Denver and Boulder, slightly more robust with their emissions accounting, but they include all forms of travel, obviously Denver with their airport, but Boulder as well includes rail and even out of boundary air travel emissions. And it takes more of a consumption-based approach. Right now, we have not done a consumption-based approach, but it is an approach that is also recommended in the GPC, which I referenced in the memo. But if we wanted to, it would basically include or capture life cycle emissions. So this could be basically like carbon embedded in manufacturing a car or growing food somewhere else. But I would say it would take an additional amount of effort, a lot of effort. But it is not something to discount, and it definitely is another source of data that we can use to just pinpoint more of where our emissions are coming from. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to that. Again, I just wanted to make sure that everyone has, kind of line on sight on what we can access easily and, maybe what's going to be more difficult to get to. I wanted to get your thoughts on some budget considerations. So this is kind of delving into Councilmember Delgadilla's questions about staffing and your response to that. I'm curious if you can speak to how the recent DRCOG grant, the Building Policy Collaborative work, is that going to impact our ability to either accelerate the work, or is it really going to divert your sustainability department's ability to focus on the action plan? Like, how do you see that playing in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question as well. The DRCOG funding is a huge piece that it's a huge lever of this, right? Our budget is just so small. But this funding, sorry.
Something needs to be muted. You
I
got
think
that?
I think
Okay,
I should
good.
get. But the funding that was formulaically awarded. Okay. $1.2 million. That's a huge chunk of change that I don't think, adding up all the years that I've worked at Broomfield, I've even seen that amount for sustainability. And that's all focused on policy for building emissions, which, as we went through this presentation tonight, that is a huge chunk that can really help us out over the next couple of years. Next couple of very, very short-term years. It would be something that staff manages internally. So that would just be it. And it is a federal grant is where the money came from. So it's kind of federal reporting. It's a lot. It's a lot to manage. We have a couple more months, unfortunately, but also maybe fortunately, until the money comes to fruition. But That's as far as my thoughts went on that. Sorry.
So I think I'm hearing we are going to get money and I think maybe some temporary staffing or consultation work that is going to supplement the goals that we're working towards.
Yes, yes. And let me clarify a little bit too. The funding does not go towards increasing our staff capacity. It will go toward, because that would be an LTA. And that was not the direction that we received from our interdepartmental meetings, figuring out the scope of the work. But it will be used to bring on probably multiple consultants in terms of community outreach and engagement, policy development, as well as software and IT systems review and permitting that might go along with that. So really sorry, putting into work. Really the staff time that would be needed for this is more just on managing the grant funding itself.
Great, thank you. And so next question is to Councilmember Ward's question about kind of how you envision the targets being set. Your response was that ACES is going to be involved in that process. So I'm interested in whether you think there's an opportunity for the community to weigh in, and specifically, you know, obviously we've got the comp plan work that's going to be really kicking off here soon. Is it possible that it would be successful, I guess, to include something in those efforts for broader input? Or would you say that this really needs to be driven more by subject matter experts, and it's something that your team and ACES are best positioned to do?
Yeah, as much as I love the community input, I think that is more geared towards the potential work that would be coming down from DRCOG, so potential policies that would impact both resident and commercial businesses. I would say these target setting efforts should be more for our, I would say, staff and subject matter experts at this time.
Perfect. Thank you. So I would say I am also in favor of both revising our adopted GHG targets in light of all this. I think there has been some confusion in the community about where things stand after 2025 and getting the data in, and kind of acknowledging, I don't know, in some way that we are not hitting our targets. But I think also, I'm in support of accelerating our timeline for action plan development and in making sure that we're adjusting our 2030 goals. But I'm hoping we can be both aspirational and realistic when we do that, because I think, you know, to the points you've made, we want to keep our numbers as high as possible, but like not let residents feel like this is something that's so unattainable that our actions don't matter, or, you know, just really, really supporting that. So that's where I stand on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Lim.
First of all, the one thing we talked about in ACES was that, you know, it was the overwhelming takeaway with what's the largest percentage of our emissions is the buildings and the energy efficiency of the buildings. So I want to kind of push back on the fact that that's all Excel and we can't do anything about it. Because a few of us have testified at the Public Utilities Commission. There's 3 of us here who have testified at the Public Utilities Commission, and that's through our membership with CC4CA. So that's important, I think, to remember that we can have an impact there through our membership or is through individual testimony. So, you know, there's the Public Utilities Commission is supposed to listen to public testimony, public concerns. They have a very complex process. And there was just Public Utilities Sunset Bill, which was just passed this legislative session. And CC4CA spent 9 months ahead of time on this bill, trying to make sure that there was greater accountability with the PUC to what ratepayers are paying, to the ability for the public to advocate in the process, to make sure there is clarity about renewable energy sources and things like that. So I don't want to say that's completely out of our hands, because it is an important way that, obviously it is important, that greening of the grid that we were referring to. And we do need to push as much as we can for that. From our own individual or membership perspectives. I guess where I would like to see action then related to that building energy efficiency is, we just adopted new building code related to the 2024 International Building Codes. There are options in there to reach energy efficiency goals in buildings. I'd like to see planning perhaps in the background, say to a developer, yes, you have options, but if we're leaning on the greening of the grid to reach our GHG goals, developer, would you like to think about electrification rather than gas infrastructure to meet those energy efficiency goals? I see it as similar to, we have an option with a developer between integrating the inclusionary housing or cash in lieu. But planning knows, and I think conveys to developers, that we would rather have the integrated housing. So I see this energy infrastructure conversation with the developers in the same way. Yes, you can reach those energy efficiency goals with natural gas infrastructure, but do you want to think about electrification if we are depending on the greening of the grid to meet those GHG goals? And I think too, we had a conversation at ACES where that made me think about the fact that we need to improve our own municipal energy efficiency, and that doesn't have to be expensive. We talked about the fact that staff is looking into the lights that are left on at night with the maintenance staff and things like that, and just simple reduction of usage and what that could mean for energy efficiency in our municipal buildings. So that certainly, those kind of efforts in my mind could be looked at as being important to be more aggressive in those building energy efficiency efforts, both in the community and as our municipal buildings go forward. So we don't have to, at least to some extent, we don't have to throw a whole lot of money at encouraging developers to electrify or encouraging maintenance staff to turn the lights out at night when they don't need to. So aggressive, yes, but realistic and without throwing a whole lot of money at it, which I know we don't have. Those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. And I think we can congratulate the city on the really tremendous decrease. The 18% decrease, or the per capita decrease, can you describe what that largely entails? What drove that decrease the most?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think overall our buildings have gotten more efficient. I do think there have been efforts made, especially with our planning team. Shout out to Tim Pate for the work that he's done with energy codes, as well as just on the developer side. I think what people are seeing is more there seems to be a bigger market drive for energy efficiency housing. I do think that definitely helps play a role. I think we're also trying to provide more resources to our developers and builders who are coming in, trying to provide recommendations. While they might not be set in stone, we are providing them with as many resources as possible from depending on what utility side they're a part of, so that they can take advantage of all of the incentives available, because there's a lot of money from our utilities available out there to take advantage of. So I would say that's kind of been the biggest driver. I would also, I hate to harp on it, but I think the greening of the grid is also what's largely driving that as of right now. We've been working to make a lot of try to work on a lot of low-hanging fruit shifts, but we haven't really been able to drive any big policy changes yet. But I think those low-hanging fruits in combination with the greening of the grid has helped drive that 2017 and 2024.
So largely new builds in the community. Potentially the decent increase in EV vehicles in the last few years, that may be ending. And this data is too old to see whether the trash program, though small as it is, might have had some impact, that we expected some reduction in greenhouse gas. And the rest of the community was already on a universal waste, so we probably won't see any other increase from that. So in that sense, like you mentioned, is there models out there of what other policy directives we could take to affect existing builds, which are the huge majority of the construction in town, or existing transportation?
Yeah, that's definitely and that's part of what we're going to be taking a closer look at, especially on what was modeled. So in the example given tonight, I feel like low end of the targets I modeled in the example given tonight for our buildings, our current buildings. So improving or retrofitting multifamily, single family, and commercial buildings, that's a huge piece that we have not yet really gotten to. Obviously, the energy code does include retrofits up to a certain square footage is when you need to make those upgrades. But really just helping get more of the word out about just how to improve the energy efficiency of your single family residence. And it can, again, the utilities, the incentives that are available, just making sure people know that they can take advantage of those. And that's, I think, a big piece that we're working on is just additional education and outreach to folks, especially multifamily.
And you said a lot of the DRCOG grant will go toward that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we might expect from these consultants some specific policy proposals of things we've already addressed the building code to a certain extent, but maybe some retrofitting incentives or policies could be down the road for us.
Yeah, there's currently action happening at DRCOG right now with their BPC or Building Performance Collaborative group that Broomfield takes active part in. And they are working to develop kind of like template or standard policies that could be taken by city and county and implemented or modified, but at least a baseline. Which is a very helpful start, since seeing it as we haven't even gotten our DRCOG funding yet, but that would at least provide us with a great baseline start. And then that consultant could come in and further that action.
In terms of what individuals can do, is it more of homeowners, or is it businesses play a bigger role?
I would say it's just kind of hard, right? It depends on the size of the business. Commercial and industrial is our biggest emitting sector, but I would say our larger businesses that have the ability, funding to be able to make those changes and to lead by example is what's going to help drive at a higher level. For our smaller businesses, it would be hard to enact policy without providing incentive because they're already working on such a constrained basis. And then on the residential side, that would definitely have, it would still have an impact, but lesser than the commercial side.
And one, you said a large influence was transportation, and we have some limited options there, though. Aren't we lucky that Amazon uses EV vehicles from our last mile unit? Because if they weren't, I don't know if any community has tried to encourage more of our delivery services to do EVs. You certainly know the difference when FedEx pulls up versus when Amazon pulls up. Are there in that sense, I don't know if I think, was it called ClearPath?
Mhm.
Are you able to compare us to other communities? Like how does Broomfield, how did it perform compared to other communities using that same tool?
Yeah, within the tool, I cannot necessarily see that. I can just see Broomfield. But I think the goal is that, when we have these discussions and are comparing our inventories and our planning, we'll be able to easily, I can reach out to our ICLEI representative and ask for our next closest companion to compare our inventory as well as our action planning against, and it would be along the same methodology.
It would just be useful to see what other communities, those who have done better, perhaps what they did, if there's any policies they implemented that we could look at
Yeah, definitely.
going forward. So appreciate that. I think that's it. Only thing I would say, real quick, would say I would keep, I don't think we can adjust our goals, but I think high goals are important to drive incentive and drive action. So I don't think we need to adjust them too much and just aim high going forward in that sense. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next is Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Deeply and intimately empathetic to the role that you have. So thank you for all that you've done. First question, what is the sustainability functions budget in absolute terms and also relative to the total?
I figured I could answer everything, but
Anyone is fine.
yeah, we'll have to look into that, and we can certainly get those answers back to you.
Cool. Question 2, what is the BAU modeled on?
Business as usual.
Yes, the assumptions driving it.
The understanding from my perspective is that the business as usual does not take into account any further action in terms of our emission reduction efforts. There is further information, I guess, on how that methodology functions within ClearPath's white papers. They do have all of this as public data. I cannot provide any more specific information as of right now, but I would definitely highly recommend, if you're looking for a light read, checking out the white papers.
I'm interested in our business as usual model if it includes developments that we have to approve or deny, for example, and the marginal impact that those have on the emission profile in a BAU state.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 3, so I would favor an absolute over intensity targets and reductions. The challenge with intensity and the focus on efficiency, energy efficiency, or any other efficiencies, it's like we're butting up against planetary boundaries. And so whereas these light bulbs over time have become extremely efficient in terms of lumens, the overall light pollution across the planet has not gone down, right? So we should have a think about efficiency, intensity, and absolute. Fourth, it might be helpful to understand my favorite term, the MAC curve, which is the marginal abatement cost curve, essentially the return on investment. So and the level of effort relative to that ROI. It seems that we can get within ballpark range of our goals if the grid is greener. However, if that doesn't happen, we don't even have a shot, right? So I would think if we spend a week's worth of LOE, 40 hours, for example, and 40 hours are spent on getting residents to get LED light bulbs versus 40 hours on trying to green the grid, what is the kilograms or metric tons of carbon relative to the level of effort that we're putting in, and what's the ROI? That's what the map curve attempts to show. Number 5, we should think through the levers. I reference here Donella Meadows and the intervention points, and really try and wrap our minds around scope 3. Most of the conversation is around scope 1 and 2, which is the energy and electricity purchased. Scope 3 are the 15 categories along the value chain. So when we think about, for example, a new development coming to town, we can think about the electricity and energy that that development will have, which we don't know to date, right? But then we should also have a think about what kind of consumption patterns and economic activity will that development also generate, which will in turn generate emissions, right? Via cars, via the actual materials, etc. Even in the development itself, for example, we might want to think about the embodied carbon. I would assume that all the developments that come through here will have kitchen appliances made of nickel, and thinking through the whole value chain and what are the impacts to Indonesia and the child labor and human trafficking that goes on with nickel relative to that, right? Anyways, that's just a preview of the low latent inhibition that my mind works through. The last one is on the scope 3 and the businesses, developments, and economic activities that we catalyze in our community. Are we thinking through, for example, I think Jeff just sent me the business investment agreements, right? And we have a sense of the financial ROIs. Do we currently or in the future, could we think about having businesses have science-based targets like the SBTI type of deal or other things, because the magnitude of emissions that some of the companies emit make Broomfield's emissions look Mickey Mouse, right? That's it. Thanks.
We'll go to Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, so my comments are not nearly as in-depth. They were very, very high level, and I was actually thoroughly impressed with how far we've come from to now since we initially set those goals. I understand the reasoning for potentially redefining those goals to be more in alignment with where we are, but the near-term action is so critical because you realize that effect then, going forward in the future. So that is so powerful. So I think we just stay the course. We keep the targets where they are. The per capita was very helpful to show that we really are making progress, even though the population has grown. I think that was continuing to show the per capita is highly beneficial, but I think we just stay the course and understand that they're goals and continue on the path that we are on. And also I'll put another plug in for the prompting all the developers that come to continue to make really wise environmental choices. So those are my comments. So thank you.
All right, we're going to go to Councilmember Peterson online.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I just want to say that this is a pretty impressive tool, and I'm so glad that we have it available to us. And even though the numbers aren't quite what we had hoped for, I think they're still very encouraging. I do have a question for the transportation fleet municipally. Does that include our police cars?
It does, yes.
Okay. With the EV technology where it's at currently, it seems like it would be an impediment for the police to try and transition to that anytime soon because of the amount of extra equipment they have on their vehicles. The weight of EVs is really limiting. Is the assumption that by 2050, when we want to hit 100% reduction, that the technology will have improved significantly and that that won't be an issue eventually?
I sure hope so. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wish I knew, but I mean, just seeing how much more efficient solar panels have gotten in the past 20 years, the capacity of batteries just for storage at homes as well as in cars has also improved dramatically over just the past handful of years. I think it is exciting to think where technology is going. And I do think the hope is that that EV batteries will just continue to improve in their capacity and efficiency over time. And we are in very close communication with our fleet team and just continue to have conversations about fleet procurement and utilization of our vehicles as well. So also just ensuring that the vehicles are getting the most and best use that they can while we still have them.
Well, that's really encouraging to hear. Thank you. Hopefully, if we can address some of the current low-hanging fruit over time, other fruit will become more available easily. So I want to say that I support adjusting the goals so that looking forward, we are considering per capita. I think that's really helpful. And I like the idea of focusing on what we can control now. And I support Mayor Pro Tem Lim's suggestion that we incentivize developers to electrify. That's all my comments for now. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go to second round. Councilmember Henkel, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make this fairly quick. I wrote a little bit of notes. First, I want to get a shout out to Councilmember Delgadillo. When she was talking, my math brain was going off. It's very true. You know, we talk about all the time on the X versus Y axis, what's in our control versus what's a result of our control. I would like to really make sure we work on our direct variables there. And then per capita, that just makes sense to me. It sounds, I would also want to see if other places measure it like that, because sometimes you kind of measure it according to how other people are doing. And then, you know, again, with the shout out that Councilmember Brown had as well on the dashboard, it's really amazing. I did have a question about United Power. You had mentioned Excel. Do we know from United Power, because we have 2 power sources, have we heard from them?
Yes, we have. They put out yearly reports regarding their progress towards their goals, and have I had a tab. This is what happens when you have 50,000 tabs open.
I feel seen.
Yes.
I know, that's when my computer shuts down at home.
Yeah. I will say our within the tool and the carbon free electricity that's modeled in there, that is after Excel's goals. I will say Excel is 75-80% of our territory. So I've just used that as like our base model for now. ClearPath also has only had a single has only had the ability to include 1 utility. But I brought up very early that we have 2, and we are obviously not alone in this. And they have been working diligently on improving the ability of being able to include multiple utilities in their, on the inventory side of things, as well as in their modeling.
Okay.
So we will definitely be working closely with them to ensure that United Power's goals get included. But I do, somewhere in my tabs, also have that United Power is working diligently, and since pulling out of their previous partnership, Tri-State, yeah, I think they've worked to reduce maybe like, it was like 20-25% of their emissions since then, which has not, it's been about a year So they're working on that, and also their battery storage and renewable generation.
Yeah, they're also a co-op too, which is different model than Excel.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would like to echo Mayor Pro Tem Lim's incentivizing for electrification. And yeah, just moving as quickly as possible. I think being aggressive in the areas that we can control. Thank you so much for this tonight. And I want to thank ACES too. I know that there's a huge group out there and mindset of just really smart people out there who are really helping us and volunteering their time for us. So thank you.
Yeah, I say that we're just a two-person team, but we've got a lot of people helping us out who are not on the sustainability team. So
Definitely. Thank you all so much for this update. I hope you have some good direction if you need it.
it's great. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, thanks.
Well, let's go ahead and take our 10-minute recess now. We have one more item. So it's 8:23. We'll be back at 8:33. Thank you. Welcome back. We're on our final study session item for the evening. It relates to the establishment of a fee structure for publicly accessible electrical vehicle charging stations that are on our Broomfield property. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. And we are rounding third with Mr. Gordon, who's our Public Works Director, and the mind still remains on sustainability. Mr. Gordon, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and city leadership. First, I want to just publicly acknowledge all the work that Alex did on that previous presentation. It was a tremendous amount of work. She did an outstanding job. But thank you for the opportunity to solicit feedback and direction for our proposal to establish an hourly and dwell time fee structure for our city-owned electric vehicle chargers. As you know, supporting electric vehicle adoption is a cornerstone strategy for achieving the community-wide emission reduction targets we've set here in Broomfield, and as we just discussed. I also want to acknowledge Kirsty, who's sitting behind me, who's a staff member that put the majority of this information together. Next slide, please. All right, the city and county currently owns and operates 12 level 2 charging stations, each with 2 charging ports. They're distributed across 5 major public locations. You'll find a charging station at Balderda Recreation Center, 2 at the Health and Human Services Building, 3 at Anthem Community Park, 3 at the Broomfield Community Center, and 3 here at the George DeCero Building. Each of these stations have 2 charging ports, providing 24 ports available, and are very heavily used by our residents, employees, and visitors. Next slide, please. So to understand how these stations are performing, staff analyzed our usage data for a full 12-month period between April of 2024 and April of 2025. The numbers show a demand that is absolutely there. We saw 1,641 unique users plug in for a total of 11,378 individual charging sessions. On average, a vehicle actively charges for about 2 hours and 34 minutes. That is a very positive statistic. However, what is not so positive is that once the battery hits 100%, vehicles are remaining parked in the charging stalls for an average post-charge dwell time of 6.3 hours. In fact, the longest single dwell time we've recorded was 178 hours. My theory is that they parked at one of our charging stations, plugged in, got an Uber over to the airport and went on a trip and came back. That's just my theory, but I don't know. We often get questions of whether Broomfield Police Department can help address this type of excessive parking issues. The bottom line is these are really there for community convenience, and enforcing charging station hours is not the highest priority of our officers. Additionally, at the end of the day, we want to encourage the use of these chargers even after hours, but we want to encourage use in a responsible manner. Next slide, please. Right now, public charging at CCOB stations is completely free. While free infrastructure is great for initial adoption, it has created an environment where drivers have zero financial incentive to move their cars when they are done fueling up. To put a finer point on it, 1,399 charging sessions during our study period exceeded 30 minutes of unnecessary post-charging parking. This charge dwell means that a handful of vehicles are blocking access for everyone else, heavily reducing charger availability to drivers who generally need a charge to get home or get to work. Ultimately, this hurts the efficiency and community benefit of the whole system. Next slide, please. The second piece of the puzzle is financial sustainability. Operating this network is not free for the city. Our estimated annual program cost is approximately $58,000 to keep these 12 start stations running safely and reliably. Breaking that down, electricity is approximately $37,000. Equipment warranties, planned hardware replacements, software licenses, et cetera, is approximately $16,000, and program and administration is approximately $5,000. To keep these chargers operational and clean, we do have a maintenance agreement in place that provides a 3-day response time for any issues, provides regular preventative maintenance and cleaning, et cetera. Next slide, please. So without a fee structure in place, the city has no dedicated revenue source to cover these growing utility bills, software renewals, and physical equipment requirements or repairs. The general fund absorbs the cost and the system continues to face congestion. With a thoughtfully designed fee structure, we believe our proposal solves both problems simultaneously. With our proposal, we can actively encourage charger turnover, vastly improve station availability to the public, secure a self-sustaining funding source for the operations, and even capture additional funds to reinvest back into the future EV program growth and expansion within Broomfield. Next slide, please. So in coordination with Drive Clean Colorado, staff evaluated 3 distinct pricing models based on our actual usage data and outlined in detail in the memo associated with this item. Tonight, staff is recommending the adoption of price model number 1, which features a dual layered time of use rate combined with a dwell fee. Specifically, this model charges a rate of 15 cents per kilowatt hour during a facility's normal business hours and steps up to 25 cents per kilowatt hour after business hours. To solve our excessive dwell time issue, we also recommend implementing a dwell fee of 40 cents per minute being instituted 30 minutes after active charging is complete. These time of use thresholds will be customized to tie directly to the posted operating hours of each individual city facility where they are placed. Next slide, please. So why this model? We believe this model balances community support with financial discipline. It offers the lowest energy cost to our drivers out of all the 3 models evaluated while still bringing in enough revenue to fully cover 100% of our program's operating costs. Additionally, the time of use design makes logical sense for users. The lower rate during business hours recognizes that many of our users are visiting city facilities or rec centers and treating these chargers as complimentary service provided alongside with the facility. The higher after-hours rate accurately captures the standalone operational maintenance and network costs of running the stations overnight. Most importantly, it robustly encourages turnover and mirrors regional best practices across our neighboring municipalities. Next slide, please. Under this model, we project an annual revenue of $71,735, excluding any additional revenue generated from the dwell fees. This provides a stable financial buffer to cover our baseline costs and fund a long-term capital replacement fund so we can refresh these stations roughly every 10 years. Per our framework, 80% of the revenue goes directly to covering direct annual costs, which breaks down to electricity at 48%, maintenance at 35%, administration at 17%. The remaining 20% of fees collected will be cleanly funneled into a dedicated, transparent revolving fund managed alongside our financial team. Our intention is for this revenue collected beyond the direct cost to be reinvested into expanding our EV infrastructure and making them more accessible to our community. Next slide, please. To wrap up, transitioning to this program fee structure delivers a clear set of benefits for Broomfield. It directly solves our congestion problem by improving charger availability and nudging drivers to move their vehicles once they're fueled up. It transitions a growing city program from a taxpayer liability to a self-sustaining infrastructure network that is reliable, clean, and well-maintained, and ultimately ensures our public charging assets are actively support Broomfield's broader climate goals in a way that is equitable, transparent, and financially sound in the long run. Next slide, please. With that, moving forward, if council agrees, staff will evaluate the exact amendments needed for the Broomfield Municipal Code to authorize this structure and will return with a formal ordinance updates based on your feedback tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions, comments, or feedback if you have on the recommended structure and would like guidance on whether we would like to pursue this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon.
Yep.
And team. Who would like to go first? I think it's excellent. We should just go for it, but I don't want to speak for everybody.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Cohen.
Someone has to go first. We'll definitely support adding cost recovery for the program, but can we just philosophically address it? The original concept, I guess, was to encourage people to get EV cars. EV cars are still more expensive than gas cars, so and realistically, someone who has an expensive electric car, a Rivian or Lotus or Lucid could use this, have used this and gotten free energy. So it isn't aimed at people who are perhaps less able to afford an EV car because we're allowing anybody to use it. So I'm sort of curious philosophically going forward, why do we still provide electric? Or I guess this is a lower than market cost still rate, correct? To the charge point stations in town, for example.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off,
No.
but yes, it is generally lower than charge point. You know, I have an electric car and it's a lower fee than what we pay. We don't view this, or at least the sustainability team doesn't view this as a revenue generating endeavor. We're really looking to encourage electric vehicle use. So we talked about things like, you know, do we want to limit that you can only stay there for 1 hour or 2 hours? But the reality is we want to have charged cars out on our roads to increase the miles that they drive, right? So if we limited it to 1 hour, then they would have to go somewhere else to charge for another hour. And that would just be an impediment to that electric vehicle. So we did set it as low as we could to where we felt comfortable that we were going to recover the cost for the taxpayers and also provide some additional funding for any unexpected costs and also to expand the program with that the additional fees.
But do we have any sense, I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand philosophically why we would, as a government, undercut the private suppliers in town. What benefit does that, are we giving to certain residents of town?
Yeah, we've structured it so it is much less expensive during the day, during the operation of one of our facilities. So when they do come to one of our facilities, you know, it can be seen as an added benefit, just like, you know, extra services at one of our recreation centers, right? So it is much less cheaper at 15 cents per kilowatt hour during those operations, specifically to see it as a add-on benefit to that facility. Then it does jump up to 25 cents to be more in line with, you know, regional providers or private charging stations. I don't know exactly what, you know, charging stations are like gas stations. It depends on where you go and what the rates are in those days. So, you know, you can see this as kind of a competition with private electric chargers, just like, you know, and there's always this dichotomy between a municipality providing those services and a private company. You know, we do that with rec centers and gyms and things like that. It's most likely less costly there. So this is just an added benefit for the community. The charging infrastructure we have is certainly not going to support all of the electric vehicles in the community.
Right.
So
I think the rec center is a good analogy since we are in competition there too. But I also was curious about distribution. Most of it seems to be concentrated to the center part of Broomfield. There's only one in Ward 4, nothing in Ward 5. Is there any expectation of, you know, I could see, you know, if they were installed at parks, it would encourage people to be able to stay longer at parks, for example, one thought. But is there any thought to future distribution more equitably throughout Broomfield?
when we do have some of those funds available for expanding the program, we will certainly look at where we think we can get the most use out of them. I think trails, you know, trailheads are a great location. Parks are a great location, you know, throughout the community. And, you know, even city buildings where employees drive, right? It would be much more convenient for me to drive my electric vehicle if I had a place to charge it over the municipal shop. So, right. So when we do have the funds available, we'll certainly do some kind of a study to make sure it's equitable and effective at the same time as far as where we recommend the next stations.
And one last question, in terms of the rate, again, I meant to ask earlier, are you anticipating we'd have some sort of indexing, you know, if electric rates go down or up, that we would adapt to the market rate, or we just address this annually, or how we would?
I don't want to make it, we don't want to make it confusing for our customers, right? Where it's one rate one day and another rate the next day. So our recommendation is that we review this annually and adjust it accordingly.
And I forgot to ask, and I don't have an electric car, but is there an app for these particular city, or is it just at point?
So currently we use a product called ClearPoint, which provides the charger, and there's an app for that you go in and you know, you type it in and it starts charging, it charges you automatically. It'll tell you what the rates are. It'll tell you if the rate changes. It'll tell you when your vehicle is full, and all that stuff.
Will it start charging you if you stay too long?
If you stay past that 30 minutes, once your vehicle hits that 100%, and if you stay past 30 minutes past that, then it'll start charging, or at least our recommendation is 40 cents per minute, which is quite steep, but it's in line with our other municipalities.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I can attest that based upon the School of Mines chargers, that yes, they are very effective at hopefully getting my son to move the EV. Because those rates added up, the fees added up way more than the actual charging for him. Okay, so my questions were around the choice of following the building hours versus following the on-peak hours. And my thought process, and I appreciate some of those answers, and realizing that we want to encourage the use of the EV charging stations while people are actually here doing business, and the benefit of doing that. But I also think we need to put more emphasis on the on-peak hours that Xcel and United Power, I looked them both up. I have United Power, but Xcel has the same 5 to 9 p.m. as now they've really closed in on those on-peak hours where they charge the higher rate. And if we're going to really do best practices, it feels like we should follow. I'd be fine with the building hours at Georgia Zero and HHS, but when we get to the parks and the rec centers, it almost feels like we're going against United Power and Xcel Energy when we're saying we're actually encouraging you to charge your vehicle from 5 to 9 p.m. because those are our business hours or our park hours. So I think we need to look closer at those hours. And partially, I started to look a little bit deeper at this. On those on-peak hours, those are the dirtier fuel hours because that's when they fire up their peaker plants, and that includes like the higher combustion rates on the gas-fired power plants. So it feels like we should not be encouraging people to be charging their cars at that point in time. So I think we should look a little closer at potentially stopping the lower rate at 5 p.m. across all facilities, and you can start at the building hours. Just a thought. And then the other question I had is, so we're not on a time of use plan right now is everything at Broomfield tied together? Are the chargers, could they be on a time of use plan with Xcel or United Power, or is it like citywide? And is there a reason why we're not on time of use?
It depends on the meter. Each building, each property has a separate meter, a different meter. Some properties might have multiple meters. So, each one of these would be treated differently. We have a lot of facilities. My understanding is that at least the great majority of facilities here in Broomfield are on a corporate plan or a corporate, so not the residential plan. But I know we have some other commercial buildings and things like that. So in our conversations with Xcel, all of our chargers are currently on a meter that is that flat rate. So we can get more information on the utilities for other buildings for you if you'd like, but that's our understanding now.
No, I was actually, well, it would be interesting overall, maybe in one of these future updates, but for the chargers, if we're on a time of use plan, then it would naturally be higher during those 5 to 9 p.m., which would give a reason to put those at a specifically higher rate. So that was my thought, but I appreciate that we're moving forward. And I was actually frustrated to see how many people sat and left their cars charging. I would never, like, it's just like you get the prompt saying your car is done charging or it's about to be done charging. And it's like a EV ownership responsibility that you should be unplugging it. I did not realize how long people lingered. So I think this is the right way to go. So thank you. Those are all my questions.
Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. And also, thank you for the presentation. My head was in the same place as Councilmember Anderson about time of use and that sort of thing and aligning with that. I understand the thought process here, but it was that sort of thought process, which actually, I'm in favor of this, by the way. I should say that very clearly. But that actually had me gravitating more towards the second price model and just having it, this is what peak, at least according to the residential rates, which I know are not exactly the same, the 25 cents per kilowatt hour would cover that peak kind of height demand charge and make sure we're in a good place. So that was one just comment, but if there's alignment with Model 1, I think that's awesome, and we can definitely move forward with that. I'm very happy with that, and I'm glad we're moving forward with this anyway. So I had a few other questions. So one of them is, how will this be communicated to users? And is there a grace period for dwelling? And I'm talking about like a brief one, like 1 minute, 5 minutes. What does this look like?
Yeah, so we obviously would update our signage at all of our facilities and do some kind of mass communications, work with our communications department to share this information with the community through social media, newsletters, and things like that. And we would figure out how long would be appropriate to inform folks. Our recommendation right now is a 30-minute grace period. So if you hit that 100%, then you still have 30 minutes to get your vehicle before it was to start charging that higher rate. And I'd like to get a clarification on the term peak, if I could, because we'll go back and evaluate it. Is the concern with charging a different rate during peak hours to discourage usage to help manage that peak demand on the grid, or is the concern the peak hours, the cost might be more, so to recover our cost more?
Yeah, that's a good question because I am conflating the two. My primary concern is about contributing to that grid sustainability, but then the side effect is, of course, yeah, it is a little bit more expensive and making sure we're covering our costs. The primary, though, is indeed that grid sustainability.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, it's a good question. Fair question. So that's awesome. Glad to know there's a grace period as well. And I would assume that within the interface of when you're paying to charge your vehicle, it would be very transparently said, like, this is the rate, it's 15 cents per kilowatt hour, whatever it is. And then the dwell fee is this after a period of time. That would be within the interface, I would hope.
Yes, the interface, like ClearPoint right now, has all that information for you when you share. Obviously, the more complex we make it with different hours and different charges and things like that, our signage might get a little bit more complex. So that's why we'd have to look at that peak versus non-peak. But the app itself will be very clear on what you're being charged.
Okay, that's awesome. And then I had one more question, and we'll see if it comes to me. That's all right. I'll hand over the mic. Thank you.
Just push your button if it comes to you. We'll come back to you. Mayor Pro Tem Lim?
Yeah, I support looking at what Councilmember Anderson had to say about shifting, even though those facility business hours for the rec centers go later than the 5 p.m. regular municipal building hours. I support looking into using the increased rate from 5 to 10 or whatever that is. I mean, it's not only got to do with the kind of infrastructure that they're using at those peak points. It's also got to do with how ratepayers end up having a lot of increases because the utility has to meet that peak demand, and then the utility puts forward. I'm kind of familiar with the kind of long-term plans that they have where they try to substantiate why they need to increase what the ratepayers are paying just because they need to meet this peak demand in the future. And so I would really encourage looking at that.
Yeah, we will certainly look at that. And just to make sure I was clear, our original proposal was to match those rates with the hours of each individual facility. So like
Right.
the park is, I think, 5 to 11, right?
Right.
That would be the 15. But we will certainly look at that. The other thing that, before we make a decision or move forward with that, it's charged kilowatt hours, right? So it's not 15 cents per minute for every minute you're plugged in. It's 15 cents per kilowatt hour, right? Is
Whatever
what
the-
we're charging. So some of these technologies, and we'll have to evaluate whether ChargePoint could do this or another technology can do this. They can actually throttle those chargers based on the power available. So, if you have one charger out of a bank of 4 and only one of them is being used, it could put more power there versus others. And it may be able to throttle them down automatically to where we could keep the rate the same at 15 cents per kilowatt hour, but the charger itself is controlling that. So that is definitely something. I appreciate the feedback on wanting to take that into consideration from council. And we will certainly look into our different options for that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you. Yeah, I concur with Councilmember Lim and Councilmember Anderson on those items. And then concurrently with Councilmember Delgadillo, I can't remember if she had asked you though, if we are going to be transparent enough ahead of time, what's that lead up time, that ramp time?
It's something that we will have a conversation with our communications department. They are the professionals that get information out to the community. So we would come up with a communications plan, and however long that is, that's what it would be. But it would certainly be several months.
Okay.
We could put flyers out, at the different centers. We can change our signage. We can do a lot of things. We could put an A-frame right in front of the charging station, so it's very clear. So there's a lot of ways we can do that, but we would most likely want to work with our communications department to come up with a communications plan.
Okay. Well, I'm in support of this, and I know that they're already kind of fighting over the chargers sometimes, so it's disheartening to know that some people are just sort of squatters, I think, for lack of a better term, on those areas. But it's just being a good citizen, I think, and knowing that we have a communal area that we need to share. Something we learn in preschool, I would hope. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go online to Councilmember Peterson next.
Thank you, Mayor. I too am generally in support of this, but I do have some questions. So the projections for how much money you'll make off of this, I'm assuming that if the service goes from being free to costing something, that it's going to be used less. So was that taken into consideration that the amount of usage you have had last year will not equate directly into the same amount of usage moving forward if there's a fee associated with it?
I'm going to have Kirsty come up and answer that question specifically. To be honest with you, it is a challenge. We don't know exactly how much people are going to use it once it goes from not free to free.
Right.
But on the flip side, if you get more turnover, you're going to get more people using it, right? So it's difficult to say exactly how much it's going to cost. We did not include those dwell fees in our, that's not what we're trying to do to, penalize the community and get extra funds or make it a revenue generator or anything like that. So we did not include those in that estimate of 71,000. But I'm going to ask Kirsty to provide a little bit more information on how she came up with that estimate.
Thank you.
All right, next is Councilmember Brown.
Oops.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I'd echo what exactly Barney said. With improved structure for the EV charging stations and being a little more reliable and available, we worked closely with Drive Clean Colorado, who works with several municipalities all across Colorado, and they found that the utilization did not go down whenever a fee structure was enacted because they are more readily available and more reliable, and there was less congestion and frustration overall. So utilization did not seem to actually go down.
Okay. And I do appreciate that the dwell fees are not for the purpose of extorting more money from our residents, but mostly for a deterrent. Okay, so based on your numbers, it looks like it takes on average about 2.5 hours to charge. And on average, some people are staying for 6.5 more hours, which adds up to like a full workday. Do you have data on what times of day they are um, sitting around the most after being charged?
Not on top of my head. I would have to dive back into the data a little bit deeper to see what timings it was, but I do, from what I can recall, it is yes, mostly overnight or after hours. But just, I did run a little bit of data just for reference for you. A typical session, like you had mentioned, the 2.5 hours would be about 25 kilowatt hours. During business hours, that'd be about $3.75, but after hours, it'd be $6.25. But yeah, maybe that helps a little bit, the comparable.
Okay. I guess similarly, do you have data on how often a particular charging location is fully occupied?
Yes.
Or like what times of day it's most fully occupied?
Yes. And again, I mean, they're really highly utilized right now. I don't think there's, during business hours, for sure, they're 100% being utilized.
Wow.
After hours, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look back in the data. Maybe I can share this 500,000 line spreadsheet with you all to go really in deep. But yeah, very, very high utilization overall. But
Okay. But it's not obvious in this moment, just because it would take a lot more research to determine whether they're more like inaccessible because they're being taken up after charging during the workday versus people leaving them there overnight.
right. And that's why I think with other peer municipalities and also working with Drive Clean Colorado, they're like, the utilization is not going to change. If anything, it might go up. And we might have more unique users utilizing the charging stations because it's more readily available with the dwell time fee and then also just the normal fees as well.
Okay, so we want more people to be able to use them. That sounds great. Okay. Regarding the adjusted fee structure in option 1, and I can see what my fellow council members were talking about as far as the draw on the grid. But I was actually curious about by making it cheaper during the day, are we incentivizing them to be used during a time that's already really busy? Do we want to incentivize them
Well,
to be used during more off hours?
To us, ideally, they would be used 24 hours a day to get electricity in the electric cars to make them more effective, right? So our intention is to try to keep them constantly utilized with constant turnover, whether that's during the middle of the day or, in the evening after hours. Because
Okay,
it doesn't do us any good from a sustainability standpoint to have those chargers sitting empty.
sure. Okay. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people that want to go out in the middle of the night to move their car after they charge it at night. But these aren't located in residential areas for the most part. So I don't think that you're going to run into the same issues there necessarily as you would at, say, an apartment complex. Regarding the dwelling fee, $30 an hour is really harsh. And I'm wondering, can we set like a max fee of like we're not going to charge you more than $100? Or is that disincentivizing them to like we want people to move? So I have one question about a max fee. My other question is, can we start with maybe $4 an hour and then if that is not enough of a deterrent, increase it later?
So I did want to go back to your first question about the 25 cent per kilowatt hour versus the 15 cent. I
Yes.
can say that the 15 cent is definitely on the very low end of kilowatt hours comparative to all the other municipalities. So the 25 cent is actually more on par with a lot of the other ones that they're starting with. So just for a cost comparison, that we're well below peer municipalities as far as how they're doing their rate structures. And then for your second question, can you repeat it?
Okay, so part one is, can we set max fee for dwelling, or do we just want to keep charging somebody $30 an hour to keep them from, dropping their car off and going to the airport?
Yeah, and I again, just looking at and working with Drive Clean Colorado and all the other peer municipalities, it varies a lot. Some of them are just the $4 that you had mentioned. Some of them are actually even more extreme than the 40 cents. I think it's like $40 an hour. So I tried to do kind of the median, but I think this is something that we just have to trial, see how the response is, see how many people actually go over that 30-minute threshold, and then reconvene the next year and decide where to move that bar. But I think we're open to starting off a little bit not as high level, but we do really want to encourage people to actually move their vehicle and make it more readily available for other EV users.
Okay. It seems like if we start high and go lower, that it would be incentivizing people to longer. So starting lower and going higher is my recommendation. One more question about if the proceeds from this not only cover the cost of the electricity, but also gives us a little bit more money each year to save up for maintenance and replacement down the road, which I think is great. Who decides how that money is going to be used?
Well, we have definable direct costs for the program, so the funds would go to that, and then our intention is for any funds beyond that to support expansion of the system, so additional charging units in additional locations throughout the city. And as we spoke earlier, ultimately it would be the city staff and Public Works determining where those would be placed, unless City Council wanted to have a conversation with that.
I would just like it to be very clear about what is allowed and not allowed for that money, so that it doesn't get diverted in other ways. Yeah, clarity is all I'm asking for. I think that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll now go to Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Gordon and Ms. Tedrick, for the good answers and presentation. So I share Councilmember Peterson's concerns that this could have a bit of a chilling effect on our community. I guess I'm curious, acknowledging that we're trying to incentivize our community via our previous agenda item tonight. We're trying to encourage them for adoption of EV cars and usage. How should we think about how we are providing this as somewhat of an amenity for our Broomfield residents? And I guess I'm thinking through the lens of Ms. Tedrick talked about all of the data that we have available to us. I'm specifically curious if we know how many of these are Broomfield residents, and or if we can tell that at all from the data, or if you even thought about, or other municipalities have thought about, specifically incentivizing maybe through decreased rates, the public offering of charging stations for residents versus non-residents.
So we don't have any way of knowing who is using our chargers specifically. So we couldn't really answer that question, whether it was employees or community members or somebody from outside of the city. Again, as an electric vehicle owner myself, I would drive out from outside the city, hopefully charge my vehicle and be able to drive back home, right? So that's part of the incentive of encouraging outside. I know there are technologies out there where you can have a log on and you can control. So for example, when I worked at a school district in Mountain View, district employees could log on to the thing and get it free, where anybody that was an employee could not. But if you can imagine, that system was a lot more expensive than a very basic system like ClearPoint, uh, ChargePoint. So that would add some costs there, plus the infrastructure to manage a program where you're trying to identify a community member versus an employee versus somebody from outside the community. The administrative burden of that would be exceptionally high. So I would be a little bit concerned about that. If you just look at our averages. So our average vehicle charges for about 2.5 hours, and then it's on the charger, just sitting there in the parking lot for 6.5 hours, right? So it's there for an 8-hour period in effect. So we want to try to encourage that turnover. Those folks that like to get there, just happen to get there a little bit early, get the charger, charge it for 2.5 hours, and they sit using the parking spot for another 6.5 hours. Those folks might be not as happy as others, but that person that does come in a little bit later and the charging station is available for them will be much happier, right? So it is a balance. We got to figure out where that balance is. But having a system where we're trying to identify specific individual users into the system would be an exceptionally challenging and administratively burdened program.
Thank you for speaking to that. I suppose I would maybe challenge that assertion. I mean, through maybe speaking with other cities or counties that have tried to implement something similar. I mean, given the location specifically of our chargers, we are trying to put them in public areas where people tend to work and recreate. So, I mean, it's not like the comparison of driving out to the mountains and then needing to drive back. I mean, I guess it seems like a different application to my ear. Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. I think if there is a way to differentiate, and I do want to be clear that I am supportive of, changing the charging structure and dwell time. So regardless of, even if we could miraculously have an administrative process to allow residents or even city staff, or however we made those criteria for people that might have free or reduced rates, I still think that, to your point, we need to charge for dwell times, because that is the number one thing that we're trying to get here, is that turnover, higher turnover, more charging, accessibility. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it would be assuming that technology is something that we would want to invest in here, identifying city staff with an account and in a directory service of some sort, that is relatively easy. But trying to provision and deprovision community members into a system where they then authenticate on our given a different rate or something like that in an app, just the provisioning, deprovisioning, and management of that would be quite a challenge. But we will certainly have conversations with other municipalities and see if anybody else has done this.
Thank you for looking into it. I greatly appreciate that. And I wanted to speak to maybe an idea that I was having for the dedicated revolving fund. And I think Councilmember Peterson also touched on this a little bit. Given that electricity is the number one highest cost we're trying to offset there, would you consider implementing solar panels on our chargers right off the bat, as soon as they can be self-funded through this program? Because then I think that changes the calculation for our peak hours, because it's basically like, if the sun's out, then we can decrease rates, and they're being self-funded-ish.
Yeah, so right now our intention is to increase and support that program. So if that includes installing solar to offset the electricity charges, I think that would fully fit in the spirit of what our proposal is.
Okay. Well, thank you for addressing those. Those were my questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. I too also support some of the concerns about grid capacity that council members Anderson, Delgadillo, Mayor Pro Tem Lim, et cetera, brought up. I honestly prefer the second price model. I don't think we necessarily should be subsidizing this as a amenity for residents. They should be paying the costs entirely for what it takes to provide the electricity to charge their vehicles. But I will say I do support the dwell time charge for, I think it was 40 cents per kilo or per minute. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other first round comments from my colleagues before we go to second round? But you're good. You're good with the proposal. Love it. Everybody else spoke, so we'll go to second round. You have 2 minutes in the second round. We'll go to you, Councilmember Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question about the ClearPoint app. Like a parking app, do you actually put in your license plate number, and could we use that to track the residency of the owner?
So, number one, I've been kind of confusing ClearPath and ChargePoint, so I apologize for that. So it's
Okay.
actually a ChargePoint that it is.
ChargePoint.
I don't know if the ChargePoint app, I don't believe it collects the driver's license or driver's plate of the vehicle itself. It's really, it doesn't communicate with your vehicle at all, other than knowing, you know, the charging state and things like that. But the communications, it's an app just like you would download any other app from the App Store. And then you put in your credit card, and that's how you register with the charger, and it will start charging and stop charging. So the app nor the charging station itself really has that much information on the vehicle. It theoretically could, but you know, it is operated by a third party administrator, so we don't have direct access into that kind of data.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson, 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make a comment on the use of these chargers. And I would say a prime use that people actually go to these charging stations for is the what is that demand charge that you get at? It's like $30-40 on like the bill, because you're doing too many things at the same time. So if I have my air conditioner running, or I want to do laundry, or we have two EVs, we want to charge both of them at the same time, that is a key reason why I would actually go to a charging station to avoid that demand charge, because we've got too many things happening all at once. So you better have to go pay the rate at the charging station and avoid that demand charge. So I don't think it's going to affect the charging that much. And I also noticed on the ChargePoint app that you can actually stop the charging. But if I stop the charging from the ChargePoint app, the system would know that I'm now dwelling, correct?
It should know that you stopped it, yes. Well, we'll have to verify that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be honest with you. I was an IT director for a dozen years. I still get help from my kids for all this stuff. My wife is the one that has the ChargePoint app, so I haven't actually used it myself. But from a technology standpoint, we absolutely should be able to initiate that 30-minute dwell time if it is stopped by the user.
Oh, because you would notice that it was drawing very little current. That's what it triggers it. Okay, so we're good. And then I would be okay with the slightly lowering that fee maybe on the dwell time, but at the same time, it's like you learn your lesson once and you won't do it again. So I'm kind of good either way. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anything else from my colleagues on this item? We have 12 total in the entire city and county, right? So there are people are fighting over them. And I think it is kind of sad that it's been free, because we've gotten a lot of emails from folks wondering why we're not charging, because electricity does cost money. So we shouldn't subsidize this. And I think if the dwelling fee isn't punitive enough, well, then it's not going to have any impact. Because if it were me and it was only $4 to park for 24 hours, I wouldn't move my car. I'd pay it. So I think it really needs to be an incentive to not hog the space We just don't have enough of them for everybody, from what I hear. And it's still a deterrent for many people that we don't have enough to justify switching to an EV, right? We really need to expand it. So I see this as a way to add that to the coffers and add more in our park areas and our trailheads and things like that. So I'm all for the proposal as presented and recommended by staff, if you need my opinion.
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. And thank you to my council colleagues for the conversation. And again, thank you all for your work that you've done on this. That concludes the agenda items for this evening's study session. Is there any other business to come before the council from my colleagues or staff? Then there being no further business, the council meeting is adjourned. Good night.